computer, yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, y'all. And thanks for bearing with us through these technical difficulties. An introduction to Decolonize Sudan. Decolonize Sudan is a women-led collective of Sudanese American organizers dedicated to providing human rights education and advocacy on Sudan. At Decolonize Sudan, as the name suggests, we operate under a framework and understanding that colonialism and imperial control is still well and alive and persists in the form of neo-colonialism. Now, does anyone in online or in person know what neo-colonialism is? Have you ever heard that term?
What does neo mean? Prefix neo.
We have someone here. Would you like to? What is your name? Mushtaba. New Age colonialism.
Go and terrorize land. Now it's mostly based on debt control, like basically China's doing in Africa right now. Like throw money around with African countries.
That's right. Yeah, I mean that's a really great definition. Talking about economic control, that is one form of neocolonialism, is resource extraction and also economic coercion in the form of blockades, in the form of sanctions, and strategically leveraged developmental and humanitarian aid. And amongst other forms of control, this also includes covert military counterinsurgency and counterterrorism operations abroad, and also overt military intervention, where you still have soldiers on the ground. Maybe those soldiers are by a different name. Maybe they're peacekeeping in a peacekeeping mission, and you still have offensive bombings, of course, in places like Haiti, Somalia, Iraq, Yemen, and Palestine, of course. So from this understanding, we inform our organizing work and our advocacy campaigns around Sudan through education and advocacy from this framework. So would you be able to go to the next slide? Thank you so much. So an overview of kind of what we're gonna go over tonight in this training, and thank you again for giving your night to learn how to become better advocates for Sudan. Just gonna mute this. And so some training objectives that we'd like for you to take out of this is to equip Sudanese youth with practical advocacy skills and effectively support Sudan through utilizing a diversity of tactics. So we're going to show you, we're going to touch on in this presentation, 4 different approaches and modalities for social change. We will speak about legal advocacy. Mawadda will guide us through protest and mobilization. Shams will draw on the topic of art as resistance. And Sadra will be finalizing this presentation, going over long-term community organizing and what that means. So this training is meant to be interactive. So each session will contain exercises and activities, and the training will have lots of information provided in a really quick amount of time. And so for those in person, we've given you all a toolkit that contains kind of some of consolidation of some of the information you'll learn today, and also some of the action items. And then in the back of the toolkit, you have 3 blank pages for notes, and you should have pens at your table for anything that, and of course, you're going to take this home, so anything that sticks with you, please take notes, or you might want to use it for some of the exercises, those blank pages. For those online, the toolkit is going to be sent to each registrant, and also will be posted on our website shortly after this training. So you will receive this toolkit in your emails. Just also a quick logistical item. After, we're gonna have part 1 and 2, which is legal advocacy and then protest. And then we're gonna have pizza. We're gonna have a little break for some food and nourishments. And then we'll go into part 2 with art as resistance and community organizing. So that's kind of what the outline for tonight is. We'd like for us to get started with an icebreaker activity. And just a simple one, share your name with those at your table maybe. If you want to move over to that table, if you feel comfortable doing that, so that you can be with a group. And then those online, I'm going to join y'all to share online here. So share your name and answer the question, why does Sudan matter to me? I can go ahead and socialize. Oh, amazing, Iman. Thank you. And those online, feel free to get off mute or to just share in chat.
Pretty much like my entire time. I'm not trying to be a place where there's nothing.
Alaikum salam, Iman. Sudan matters to me because its connection to home, love, and lineage. Growing up in diaspora, Sudan always felt like my safe and happy place. It's really beautiful, and I can resonate a lot with that. I don't think that I introduced myself. My name is Saad, and I grew up in Hassaisa in Sudan, and very much so feel that connection, that is home, and that, I always thought about one day, inshallah, I will go back home, maybe move back home and maybe be able to contribute to, justice and the infrastructure there. Yeah, so inshallah, God willing, that will still be possible for our people. Thank you so much for sharing, Iman. We have some great conversations happening in person. I wish y'all were here. You write music?
Songs.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Wow. Inshallah, I always That's how I always spoke about it too. It's been hardest thing to grieve that dream of returning behind the lake. I'm really happy to be here. I'm surrounded by my screaming nephews. Otherwise, I would have been unmuted. Amen. That's real. Hi, Riley. Okay, I'll read, Riley, I'll read your answer. Hi there, I'm Riley. I was at the teaching in New Orleans. Oh, welcome, Riley. Good to see you. And I really respected what y'all are up to. I think Sudan's crisis matters not just for the sheer scale of the suffering, which I'm sure everyone here knows, but because I think its current situation really shows what the modern global system is all about. Like around the world, that's the future for everyone. If we don't do anything about it, the fact that it's less reported on only proves that more, I think. But yeah, I remain optimistic, especially with the work you guys do. Alhamdulillah, bless you, Riley. Thank you so much for that answer. Oh. And it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us and for coming to that teaching in New Orleans. That was really a special one. Yeah, that was, I was living in New Orleans for some years. And so to be able to go back and do that teaching there was really great. I hope that y'all are doing okay over there with all of the oppressive legislation that y'all are facing from the state. I hope you take care and stay safe. Thank you. Yeah, definitely feel free to grab anything from the table. Yeah, I know they are. Okay. For Riley, there was a minor electoral victory. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good to see you.
Right? And
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Mhm. Exactly.
Again, they just like.
Yeah, you make a really good point, brother. The militia, just like in Congo, militia is made up of child soldiers and then also those who have been paid, and are those lower level fighters are don't really understand what's going on. They're just, like, remember the Colombian fighters that were brought in? They literally were dropped. They were told a lie on what they were going to do, and they were just dropped in Sudan and told, like, you're gonna fight here. So it's really alarming what this militia was able to do in such a short amount of time in invading and occupying our lands. And so with that, I want to move on to
Oh, okay.
oh no, go for it, go for it. Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your conversation is great.
Got caught up with
No,
You're
it's
good,
okay.
you're
All
good.
right, yeah. Your turn.
that because I remember back in 2019, I didn't use that Omar Bashir was based that, and then the guy who became the next leader was actually willing to make Sudan a better place. But then, in just about a year or two, the military overthrew him basically, and then like Sudan got its first democratically elected leader who was actually trying to help the country, and then 2 years later, the military of the country overthrew him basically. I was a committee, and who's the other guy? Okay, basically, they both overthrew the new the new president of Sudan basically. That was like his what, third term?
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, because he
Yeah, that was in 2019, and then 2023, the militia took over.
no, it was in 2021 the coup started. Like
A small version of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
2019, military
The coup,
overthrew
yeah,
in
yeah, you're right.
2021.
Mhm.
You had the war and
I think that help for that year. Ships that, didn't brought them the hit.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're inside.
Brothers, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is it okay if we, in the break time, we continue conversation? This is really great, though. I love, this is what this space is supposed to be for. It's an open forum and for us to speak about what's happening to us and to learn about how do we speak about what's happening to us. So this is really beautiful. I want to continue that conversation in break. And so I want to move on to the basics of, my portion will cover legal advocacy. And go one slide further. So this is kind of this slide on at the heart of advocacy broadly, not just legal advocacy, is a struggle for power. So this is some questions to ask yourself when you're asking for interventions, when you're advocating. And this is questions that I ask myself whenever I'm pushing a certain intervention. With this intervention, am I defining power? Do I understand my own privilege and understand my positionality within the power structure? For example, we are in America, and therefore, many of us might have American passports, and therefore we have, by that very nature, we have this ability to travel anywhere in the world, and that's most of the world cannot do that, and therefore we have this proximity to power. And the kinds of demands that we make, therefore, we must be more critical to ensure that they are reflecting those less proximate to power. And this is especially crucial considering the deliberate lack of access to internet and telecommunications tools in Sudan, making it nearly impossible for many everyday people to document their abuses and broadcast their demands. So we really have this amana, we are entrusted with a really important duty and the role of youth in advocacy movements, particularly Sudanese American youth, is really vital in this time, in the midst of survivors on the ground being deliberately silenced. And are we debating power? Are we having a public conversation about power, or are we just legitimizing and doing a performance? Example, Cory Booker the other day, he spoke for how many hours?
25 hours.
25 hours. That's amazing. But he really didn't say much about what he was going to do, about any kind of transformative change that was going to take place. It seemed more like an election stunt.
Yeah, I mean, the only person to have a much longer speech was one guy in the 1950s
That's
who tried to prevent the Civil Rights Act.
During Nixon. Yeah, that's
Even
right.
though the a similar act would end up becoming a thing in the mid-60s.
That's right. Thank you. And then, yeah, so are we being bold in our platforms, and are we seeking transformative change? Are we building power? Does this strategy allow you to build power? Are we disrupting power? Is this an opportunity to disrupt power and make it harder for our oppressors to suspend human rights? And then are we redistributing power? Does this intervention allow you to repair harm and shift power away from harming communities and towards those who have been harmed? So with that foundation in mind, one thing that we within Decolonize Sudan want to push away from is a framework around a charity model and shift to what is called what many call a social model. And shift to what many call a social model. And I'll break down what this means. So while charity is necessary, especially at this time when the survival of our people depends on mutual aid and charity because states are not providing any aid. So charity is necessary on one hand. But one thing that legal advocacy teaches us is that rather than talking about our issues exclusively in terms of please give our people money, our country needs saving, it urges us to make demands in terms of rights and obligations. Under international law, Sudanese people have the right to be free from genocide and forced displacement. Our people have the right to be free from occupation and colonialism. Our people have the right to self-determination. And states have an obligation to not aid and abet in genocide, to not commit genocide, let alone aiding and abetting. And they have an obligation to take in refugees. There's this thing called non-refoulement in international law. Every country must take in those seeking asylum. And international courts and bodies have an obligation to do everything in their power to stop genocide, occupation, and forced displacement from happening. These states and these systems have failed us. And this is the basis on which we start our negotiations. So let's move to international legal advocacy. So how does international law work? And how can we as civilians in the US engage and influence these systems? At the center of international law is the United Nations, the UN, which creates international law through treaties, resolutions, and orders. The UN is made up of three primary entities. They call them organs, weird name, weird thing to call it, because it's one big body. This General Assembly, which is composed of all member states who are members of the UN. The Security Council, which is led by 5 permanent members, and the International Court of Justice, which is the court of the UN. The UN presents itself as a neutral institution dedicated to collective human rights. When you understand the history of the UN and how it works on a basic level, it becomes very clear that it is simply a tool that has been used to maintain Western dominance. So the UN stems out of this thing called the League of Nations. This League of Nations operated from 1920 to 1946. And its main function was formalizing colonial rule through a mandate system, essentially dividing the colonized world into areas of control. So the British will control here, the French will control here, the Russians will control here. These empires would meet up in forums for the League of Nations and decide the rules of colonialism. So this set the foundation for the creation of the United Nations in 1948, which came directly after World War II and in the midst of the colonies all over the world fighting for and obtaining their independence. So the UN had to operate under a neo-colonial system. That's what we were talking about with neocolonialism, and had a new set of empires to lead it. The UN is led by the Security Council, like I mentioned, which has 5 permanent members. Those members are the United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, and the United States. The UN Charter names these 5 as the quote-unquote great powers that were the victors of World War II. Permanent members, these 5, can veto, block any resolution. They can create any substantive resolution, and they get to decide who the members of the UN are. So the bulk of international law really is created by these 5 countries. The court of the UN is called the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. And this entity is a little more independent from the UN because it is not subject, its decisions are not subject to veto from those 5 powers that I just mentioned. This is where a state can bring a civil charge against another state. there's currently a case within the ICJ that Sudan has brought against the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, for genocide complicity in Sudan, specifically saying that the UAE is arming and funding the Rapid Support Forces, RSF militia, that has destabilized our country, forcibly displaced our population, and continues to violently occupy much of the country and commit genocide. So note that Sudan cannot bring a case against the RSF directly because the RSF is not a state. It is a corporate entity. Separate from the UN is the International Criminal Court. And this is a separate body from the UN. It has no affiliation with the UN. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, is where individuals can be prosecuted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Historically, almost all individuals that have been prosecuted at the ICC have been heads of state of African nations. Scholars argue that the main perpetrators of human rights violations in the modern world have been the very empires at the head of the UN Security Council and corporations, neither of which are being punished under this system, and in fact are the major creators and enforcers of international law. So this system, it sucks. And good legal advocates acknowledge this. They think beyond the bounds of the UN and are critical about what they ask of the UN and the ICC. They do this whilst using UN mechanisms as much as they can to defend their people. For example, Nelson Mandela was able to go to the UN to call for an end to South African apartheid. Another example is W.E.B. Du Bois from Louisiana. He went to the UN to expose the US for its treatment of Black American people and used it really as a forum to tell the stories of Black American people whilst the US was using this rhetoric that all of the people in the US were equal. He really exposed that by going to the UN and presenting all of these stories of how Black American people were treated. So we can utilize the UN as a tool to achieve our organizing demands, but do we have any alternatives? Well, as a direct result of the criticism of these entities operating as tools of empire, those in the quote-unquote colonized world, the global South, have come together and created alternative courts based around what's called people-centered human rights. Some examples of these courts are the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the people and these things called people's tribunals, which have popped up all over the world. It's just communities coming together and creating their own tribunals, their own courts, telling their stories and the stories of their people, and actually trying other states and other entities and individuals in those tribunals. And for example, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, long before the ICJ stated that the UN court stated that Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine, all of these people's tribunals, just adding some people here, all of these people's tribunals had already come together and put together findings, put together stories, interviewed victims, and came to these rulings well before the ICJ came to this ruling. So any civilian group or organization can submit testimony to these courts about human rights violations that are happening to them. So this is one way we can directly engage with any of these courts, is submitting testimony. As I'll talk about in my next portion, similar to domestic advocacy, there's power in numbers. So when you get more stories together, that creates a stronger petition. And so now I'll switch to talking about US policy, since we are in the US. For those that may be in the UK, a lot of online, many of these ideas are consistent and stand, there are many parallels, but there are a couple of differences that I'll talk about here. So US foreign policy has long shaped Sudan's political and economic reality, often in ways that harm rather than help our people. For decades, the US designated Sudan as a state sponsor of terrorism and sanctioned Sudan for as part of the so-called war on terror that the US was raging on most of the world. This label cut Sudan off from international financial institutions, led to devastating economic conditions, and essentially starved our people of essential resources. So meanwhile, the Sudanese people continued to function, and everyday civilians bore the brunt of many of these policies. The US finally lifted sanctions in 2020, but it wasn't because of concern for Sudanese people. It was in exchange for Sudan's normalization of relations with Israel. So that's what happened at the Abraham Accords, if you ever hear about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one example of how the US sanctions and economic coercion and control are wielded as a geopolitical tool rather than as a human rights measure. So that's why we must be extremely careful in our appeals to the US government. Just like we're careful about appeals to the UN, some of these guidelines are calls for broad sanctions to our country, calls for terrorism designations, which broadly affect civilians more than anyone else, and calls for military intervention. This includes calls for UN peacekeeping missions. That's another word for a military intervention, whenever you hear that. Like currently in Somalia, there are UN peacekeeping troops, and they're really just US troops on the ground in Somalia. So, however, there are moments when US law can be leveraged strategically. A current example is a bill that is actively in both the House and Senate in the US, that is an arms embargo on the UAE. This bill aims to hold the UAE accountable for its role in arming the RSF and funding the RSF. Unlike broad sanctions that push entire populations, this bill targets those directly fueling the violence in Sudan and focuses on US complicity with that, because the UAE is one of the main defense partners to the US, and so has great power when it comes to what the UAE is doing, who the UAE is arming and funding. And so legislators that are friendly to Sudanese people got together, created this bill, and are actively pushing that specifically that complicity in the arming and funding to cut off the arms supply to the RSF. So this is an example of using a legal mechanism in a way that weakens an imperial force, an occupying force, rather than reinforcing it. So our advocacy must always be rooted in an understanding of history, recognizing the dangers of appealing to empire, while strategically using all available tools that we have to fight for Sudan's freedom. So given this foundation, what are ways that you can ethically engage in domestic congressional advocacy in Sudan? Like, how does congressional advocacy even work? So you can, again, like I said, you can make petitions where many people can get together, and you can get as many people's stories, and as many stories as possible is really gives the strength to the petition. Or you can directly lobby, and that's a term that we'll get into this with my exercise, but that's a term that we typically, when you hear about lobbying, you think about a corporate entity lobbying, like providing funds for an elected official to have the kind of to shift their policies towards what that corporation wants. But lobbying really just is interacting with an elected official, calling, emailing, writing letters to your local senators and representatives, or other legislators that you think may be sympathetic to or express support or opposition for legislation. So congress.gov is how you track bills and find contact information. Democracy.io, which is in the toolkit, is where you can go to find out who representatives are in different regions. And then change.org is a way to make and distribute petitions online. This is a really easy and quick way to get as many numbers of people online as you can. We created our own change.org petition around the UAE arms embargo, and that's located at change.org/UAE arms embargo. An advocacy group can collect an impressive amount of petitions and then hold media events to display the petitions and have lobbying meetings with decision makers. This is really an extremely effective way at shifting policy. So given all of this, we're going to have a short activity here, very short, on lobby a legislator. So would y'all be down to be mock legislators? Okay. Okay. So the four of us in this table are legislators, and we'll just stand up and go around and speak to us about Sudanese policy. Advocate for any policy that you think is effective, and try to come back to some of those questions that around questions to ask yourself in responsible and ethical advocacy. So we'll just go around now. We'll have like just 10 minutes, and then we'll shift over to Muwatta's presentation, inshallah. And those online probably handle this.
We can appoint one person.
One person, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the online or do you want to do the in-person?
That sounds good. Yeah, I'll do it. Or maybe it'll just be, I'll just sit here, and if anyone wants to come to me,
Okay.
and then it'll be also be online. Okay.
All right. I'm gonna set a time.
Thank you. Oh, I just want to go. Thank you for coming. No, you're good. You came perfect time. Thank you so much. Oh, I really cannot thank you enough for coming so last minute. Brainstorming. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little scrambled, but thank you so much for coming so last minute. Really, and oh my God, okay, next time we'll have to actually plan, inshallah. Inshallah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I didn't. Oh, okay, that's good. No, but she'll still make it.
Yes,
Alhamdulillah. That's good, inshallah.
I've been going to that presentation. I think I got like a good idea.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Every slide to me makes sense. So I don't think I'll share it. Maybe go through it one more time.
And Amina went in, she's in it right now.
Okay.
It's some last minute.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I saw that when I got off it, and then when I got here, I called her. She called me, and then she's like, "Okay, I did it." Ooh, she's working fast.
Alhamdulillah.
So,
No, I definitely do. Yeah, I'll sit next to you. I'll just sit next to you. Would you want, I can just have the notes up on this computer? Would that be helpful?
I was gonna use my phone.
Okay.
Because I took some notes on my notes app.
Yeah, whatever.
Help me pinpoint my thoughts.
Perfect.
Throughout the presentation.
Okay.
But did you want me to sit anywhere specific?
Maybe here, and then I can just sit right next to you.
Because of the
Yes. I'm gonna go to these guys to pretend I'm a legislator.
I'll join.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna check the chat. Actually, it was the dictator now. I don't really know what's going on.
So what's happening in Sudan right now is that there is currently a civil war between
like or like being close to their so
yes.
like there's like stand over the place, it's not like I would say because you know
Or if you want to- I can-
Well, I mean, at the same time, what do you like, the different power, what do we want to ask the US to do? We want them to be a certain, we want them to be giving, like, you know, we want them to be involved in that way, or do you want them to ask, do you want to ask them to stop being involved? Or like hold really accountable, or like stop normalizing, you know.
but if you want like to be
Sure that-
Yeah.
okay, so
very close, community of Sudanese. And currently, about 100,000 potential voters. To ensure that you win your upcoming election and along with these votes, you can also know the next
Yeah.
in return, we would like to.
I think we'll get into this in Melissa's part, but a lot of
Upcoming.
this comes down to like putting pressure on them. So like when you threaten them, like, you know, they will do both. But if you actually have a way to threaten their ability to use power, then they will, you know, or if you have power, so we start talking about community organizing, like so I was saying, like if you have a petition with 3 or 30 signatures, it's a lot less impactful than like 300. You know, so just like building power as people, as everyday people, to influence those countries or those individuals.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
have a lot of
definitely sanctioning the
concentration.
entity that is imposed by draft would affect me,
And I
yeah.
feel like
So maybe
I think
there's
a lot of big examples that I have like during the presentation are about like the Palestinian movements that we see in DFW. And I think something I'm really trying to push people to realize is like the population in DFW of I would say like Palestinian people is I would say equally as impactful as Sudanese people. Like I think we do have power in numbers, especially in DFW. We just need to learn ways to utilize it. And I think when we were younger, we did rely more on like our parents to put us in like community settings, like okay, come with me, we're going to this event, and like we didn't know what it was. So I feel like even as like us being in this area kind of shows us like we do have a community place to go to organize and mobilize. You know, that I was signing up to. So at least we can just bring people and like organize. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting like topic because like we're one of the cities that
Yeah, that was amazing.
I was trying to speak my last week. And there's a certain congressman, and this congressman.
And it might be the reason, I'll be honest, I don't know the actual numbers about me. But they're see, I knew it, I knew the answer, but I didn't know. But I knew in a way, my way of practice healthy beliefs.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you have power, remember, power.
Hello, online people. Did anyone get a chance to pitch maybe a lobbying pitch?
One of the last days of the study.
Sanction the UAE, that's a great one.
Well, that was the last year's topic considered, and that legislator was head of office.
I was just talking with one of the groups over here, and we were just reflecting on one person's idea to get the US to help rebuild Sudan, but then we kind of analyzed that from a perspective of power, and came to the conclusion that maybe we don't want to ask the US to do something like that, but more so kind of manage its relations with UAE, right? So someone was mentioning that recently they funded the UAE with like $1 billion or something, for general support things, but like normalizing relations with UAE, actively funding them, aiding and abetting them, giving them diplomatic cover. These are all things that the US is actively doing that it shouldn't be doing. So those would be good lobbying asks as well.
With material support.
Then they're gonna want power over it. Exactly. Someone was saying the US doesn't do anything for you for free. They're gonna want something back. Exactly. Riley, that's the issue with US policy. We're the capital of the world empire, so having the most power to affect it, but that means the way we interact with the world is imperialist. So true. That's very true. And someone was saying it's also because it's a capitalist country as well. Okay, that's actually our timer. Just getting out is probably the best realistic legal goal, and probably the least harmful goal as well. Just getting the US uninvolved. But we were also reflecting on how do you get a country with power to give up its power? And that's something we're going to get in with the next section in terms of like direct action, mobilizations, and community organizing. All right, so I think we're going to continue. Yeah. Okay, nice.
Just do like a really brief recap if anyone wants to share.
Okay.
If anyone is it unmuted?
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum, ya shabab. So just briefly,
I think we're gonna get started again.
let's briefly recap. Again, thank you. Let's continue this conversation right after, but let's just briefly recap this. Anything interesting that y'all heard as legislators or that y'all brought up that you want to share? If not, I can share a couple things from these guys because it was really amazing. It was so they told me that we need to do targeted sanctions on the UAE and any arms providers. That I had, one of the people gave me a number on the exact amount of Sudanese constituents that I had in my district and said I have 150 constituents and they'd love to organize these constituents. They know there's an election coming, love to organize them for me. They'd love to give me $100,000 in funds for my campaign. So that's amazing. I'll definitely take that. And at the end, they ended it off with, we're gonna, if there's follow-up research that we're gonna do, and we're gonna send you that research and follow up with you. And that was really amazing. That keeps it on my mind. And they really beautifully explained in a very short period of time what was happening in Sudan. Because I'm acting like, I'm a legislator, I had no idea what's going on over there. So really concise and very articulate and a beautiful explanation of everything, and asks specific demands and asks on what they wanted from me to push as far as US policy on Sudan. Is there anyone else that wants to share anything interesting that came up in this exercise? Welcome. To those who are new in the chat and in the room, thank you so much for joining us. we are just wrapping up the legal advocacy section, which is the first part of our training. So no worries, and also this recording is, this presentation is all being recorded and will be shared on our website, and all of the slides will be shared on our website, as well as the finished toolkit that you have on your tables. So we're just wrapping up the legal advocacy portion, and going to move to mobilization and protest. What this means, and I want to deeply thank Mowadda Ghalab, who is joining us very last minute, and just tapped in to do this presentation in substitution of Amina, who couldn't make it today. So really thank you again for joining us so last minute, and for educating us about protest, about mobilization, and about direct action. Would you like to sit here? Would you either way?
All you can say is
Okay,
with
You wanna-
Zoom camera?
no, this
Zoom
one.
camera.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the Zoom.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Maybe. Assalamu alaikum. How are you guys doing today? Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I'm good, alhamdulillah. Just got off of work, but it's okay. So I wanted to start, just kind of wanted to ease into it and see what you guys think. So I wanted to ask what your definition of a protest is. Does anyone want to share? Let me see. We'll say anything. Anyone want to share what their definition of a protest is?
And anyone online can share in chat.
Yes. Okay.
So,
Okay.
an act of social or political, what could be a simple
Okay.
act, kneeling down,
Mm-hmm.
burning flags, mass people, like, it could be as simple as one thing or big as however big, how many other people show up.
Okay.
Why burning flag is complete.
Yeah. Specific issue. Okay. So I will say those are very good answers. Is this connected to? No. Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh no, it's okay. I think it's on the. Oh. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we'd like to express that the definition of a protest is a public expression or statement to convey disapproval, disagreement, dissent, and or objection. So to try to put it in my words, my definition of protest is really aiming to influence public opinion. So like you said, a specific issue, and also drawing attention to perceived justice. So everyone knows that in each society, people have different definitions of justice. And so I think protests kind of take that on into physical form and show people in society what they're okay with and what they're not okay with. And I also feel like it pushes for change in government policy and legislation. So just like your section that you just went over, legal aid, and also connecting the government to its community to create change. And so okay. And so to define mobilization, it's the process of bringing people together physically or digitally to collect action for a shared cause. So these different examples, we're going to go into why each one is different and why each one is important, but also trying to bring more awareness for ways that you can create change in your own community. I know that that's something that we spoke to on this side, and having more confidence in our communities and the power that we have. So we just wanted to touch on that topic. So the first thing we wanted to go over is why it's important to stand for Sudan. Number one is to educate, and number two is to create action. Does anybody want to touch on that, what it means to them before we get into it? Education and action? Anyone? Okay, that's okay. So basically to talk about education, so I can see around the room that most of us are Sudani. But for example, so I had recently just spoke at an event for the Noon Collective, And I will say majority of the people in the room were not Sudani. So a lot of them did get to learn more about what's actually going on in Sudan. And she also emphasized defining that what's going on in Sudan is not a civil war. And a lot of the feedback that was received that I could overhear in the room was that a lot of people did take a lot from the conversation in terms of creating their own opinions and not basing the information that they gather from more reliable sources, basically. So a lot of people would say like, oh, I saw this on CNN, like I saw it was a civil war, like why are you telling me that it's different? And so I think it's really important to have settings just like this in the New Collective to also just sit in rooms and talk with actual people who are in touch with people in Sudan or different parts of the world who are actually impacted by this. And also to create change. So mobilization is about bringing people together to create pressure for change. If you think about it, there are a lot of countries around the world that don't really have protests. I know that Europeans are infamous for it, Americans are also as well. But I want you to ask yourselves, like, how much about other worlds would you know, other countries, sorry, how much about other countries would you know if it were not for protests? And also, the most effective protests are rallied around essential and achievable demands. So there are people who are protesting for things that you may not think are important. A lot of people see people disrupt like celebrity events. For example, like animal cruelty, right? Like you've seen people get like flour pushed on them or like paint on them on red carpet events. And people will think like, oh, that's kind of dumb, like you're fighting for animals, but these are things that are actually really important to them. Yes. Yeah, of course.
So, especially within our recent history, think of the Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah.
As a Black American, there were no achievable demands that were made. You just saw people riot, tear up the city.
Yeah.
And there was so much grift and there was so much corruption that came out of that it really damaged the image of Black Americans. So when you are protesting and educating, make sure you have an achievable and actionable demand that you can extract from the protest that you are engaging in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, BLM's been around since what, 2014?
I think 2013.
Can I add to
I
that?
always like almost every other year, I always think about BLM, 2014, but 2021, 2020.
It's not an organic movement.
Yeah, can I add to that? Because it's a really great example that I always come back to is how many protests in Peru are conducted. Very coordinated. Like a bunch of workers will go on strike or a bunch of consumers will stop buying and have a very achievable goal that day. You need to raise wages by this many cents, this many dollars. And it is very highly effective. Because it is around this very achievable demand and there is coordination.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the last time the minimum wage was raised was like in the early 2010s.
Yeah.
$15, I think, but still.
I just want to add on top of that. I don't think the protests were really it's not like nothing happened from them. Like a lot of states did require body cam, qualified immunity was like taken back a little bit. So they did hit concessions, but there was no large scale reform. However,
yeah, I mean, those were like for most of 2020, but what they got into was mostly minor stuff, not like
and so a lot of people, I will touch on that. For George Floyd, a lot of people took that movement. And I think a lot of people have vilified it. But there's also change within that movement that's still going on in 2025. So we are going to touch on that subject. But I do like the input that you guys have said so far, and I like the discussion that's creating, which is important to mobilization. So some of the key messages we wanted to take away from this is to protest. So whether it's in the form of mass action, direct action, boycotting, digital organizing, it's all necessary because it creates advocacy. And legal advocacy alone is not enough. So these highlighted, bolded words mass action, direct action, boycotting, and digital organizing are topics that we're going to go over. So to define mass action, right? These photos are some of the most infamous photos from the protests that took place in Sudan from 2018 to 2019. A lot of you have probably seen this. You see the, well, I don't know her exact Ala. Yeah, I don't want to mess up her name. Ala. So she's infamously known for this white thobe that she wore, and these pictures are, I would say, they're timeless in Sudan's history. Especially in the era where a lot of people were being silenced and media was being silenced. We had pictures like this to kind of give us hope and also hold on to and push into mainstream media. So to go back to mass action, they're large-scale collective demonstrations of people coming together to demand change, disrupt oppression, and show solidarity for a cause. So some of the key elements are visibility, again, within the media, within the Western world. Number two, people power. Number three, momentum building. And number four, nonviolence or disruptive. So to touch on the momentum building, a lot of people think that protests or movements just kind of come out of nowhere. When, if you look back in any major protest, you will see that there was a stem or a root cause, or a root event that started off. For example, we have like the Arab Spring, right? A lot of people know more about the Arab Spring based off of the fact that it took place in different countries, and then it took the mobilization of those countries to actually create it and to create cause and solidarity. And then nonviolent or disruptive. So for example, we spoke about like Malcolm X and MLK, and we see the difference in their movements and how it created change in America. Number two, we're going to go over direct action. So it's an intentional, immediate act of protest or resistance aimed at disrupting unjust systems, creating pressure for change, or directly addressing an issue without relying on intermediaries like politicians or institutions. So, for example, if you see that there are people who go towards, I wouldn't say towards, but they'll go voice their frustrations onto politicians. You see that within like your local communities, like when people go to town halls and they voice their frustrations about what's going on, but also institutions. So we have a lot of infamous universities around us in DFW, for example, UTD. This isn't any of the photos that you see, but UTD is widely known for holding Palestinian protests on their campus to the point where they've had legal aid needed for them. They've had like GoFundMe started to help the students that were arrested. A lot of them were being targeted by police and by government institutions. So we see that happening within DFW. So for example, disruptive forms of protests like sit-ins or strikes. An example would be this photo that you see is an Arab American activist coordinated with longshoremen in Oakland to refuse unloading of Israeli shipments. Another example of this, which some of you may not know, was actually a few months ago. So hundreds of people protested. Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, it's okay.
So like in this new age of protesting, where you see like a little bit of fascism is taking over, just a little bit of sprinkle. So like
Sprinkle.
as talking to like people with, I guess, like F1 visas, H1 visas, for work, or whatever. How would they protest without endangering their entire livelihood?
That's a really great question, and literally we will be covering that Sunday at this spot in the Jalia, having a Know Your Rights training, Know and Defend Your Rights, and it will also be offered online, in which we'll have a DOJ accredited immigration attorney come in and speak to people specifically about student protests and specifically about Sudanese student protesters, as well as other migrant protesters, but covering Sudanese protesters in particular, especially given the Trump administration putting Sudan on the red list of the travel ban list, and deporting many Black students in particular. So Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time here at the Jalia and online. So go ahead and register, and you can tune into that training.
Yes. And I will say we also do have that in the presentation. So there's like 3 different forms of active protesting. and this is what I like about the different zones, especially that we're going to go over, is that it gives real world examples for how you can get involved in protests. And I know that recently, I might quote it incorrectly, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But in the state of Texas, it's become I would say they villainize people that attend protests. So for example, I don't know that I mentioned that I'm a co-founder of the African Muslims of Texas. And we are trying to become established as a 501c3 in the state of Texas. And one of the things that we do have to look out for that my parents even spoke to me about was my participation in protests. And I know that some people who have participated in protests have been placed on a terrorist watch list. And so those are like different ways that you can be villainized for participating in protests. And so I can't give too much advice by saying like, because I know it makes people scared.
Yeah, and that is
So
the entire purpose of these laws, because they'll maybe target a handful of people, but
Right.
the rest of the nation is in fear and won't go out and protest, won't rage, won't be mad at what's going on. Will be too afraid to really do anything, and that's the purpose. Later on in this presentation, we do go into a little bit of ways to just very simple ways regarding these different types of protests to keep yourself and your community safe.
Inshallah, yes. And so, yeah, those are just kind of things to take into consideration. So just to go back to disruptive protest. So I don't know exactly when it was. I was there, I swear. But there was an Israeli, I would say they coined it as the largest Zionist conference in the world. And it was held here in Dallas, Texas. Yeah, it was held here. And it was held at I was at that hotel. Sheraton or Hilton. I don't want to misquote. I mean, not misquote because I don't remember. But the whole intent of it was that the people who are attending this conference were all staying within this hotel. And so the PYM movement took it upon themselves to say, you're in this city, I understand, but you will not rest, you will not sleep. And so the point of the protest was to make as much noise as you could. So people came out there. I remember I went out there with like frying pans. People came with like speakers and we were like clanging, making a lot of noise, to the point where some of the people from the conference did come outside. There was police presence, so it kept both sides safe, but it was a form of demonstration to let people know, you travel freely. Everyone has, the First Amendment, but you might be met with, some disruption from the community of Dallas. So I think that was a really good example of, for example, the protests. You see pictures like this of things happening in Oakland, but there are also pictures of things like this happening within DFW. And so to touch on constructive forms of protests, so mutual aid, did you want to touch on like mutual aid or anything like that?
I think Sadra will be speaking a lot on the mutual aid topic, so just leave that for her.
Okay. And then community takeover. So I know that you mentioned George Floyd. And so one of the most recent developments is the George Floyd Square. So citizens took it upon themselves to take the area and the place where the event where the murder occurred to reclaim it. So they would they would feed the homeless, they would provide them with clothing, they would put out flowers, they would give out food. And so I would say it turned it kind of into like a memorial, but a beautiful way to kind of show that, you haven't defeated our souls, you haven't defeated our protests and our purpose. One recent development in this is that the city of Minneapolis is trying to reclaim the spot. So they're trying to the example I use is kind of like business as usual. So kind of going back and reverting back to what the place was. I think sort of to try to remove some of the remnants of what took place there. So
and it's amazing. They took over a whole hotel and whole shopping center. Created a community center in that in that area.
To the point where I think some of their events they get some aid like from the police. They like block off the streets and things like that to hold events in their community. So I think that's a really great example. So a form of boycotting. So when people collectively refuse to buy, use, or support products, services, or institutions linked to injustice, I would say that I think this is the example of protest that most of us have seen within the past 2 years, especially with going on in Palestine. So Starbucks, McDonald's, big corporations, and things like that. So the key elements are to target, sustain, and collectively, strategically weaken the financial power of the oppressive entities and pressure them to change policies or practices. If we think back to the Montgomery bus boycotts, that we saw a citywide boycott on public transport that lasted 381 days in Montgomery, Alabama. A lot of people only think of Rosa Parks when they think of that moment, but there are examples of like 381 days, and that didn't just come from anyone. That took a whole community to put that together. Did anyone want to maybe have any examples of boycotts that they've seen? Target, the DEI program, Target as a big.
So like there's a difference between boycotting private entities and public entities.
Right.
When you boycott the Montgomery bus system, that's a public entity that goes into tax revenue. That's real tangible things that governments have to make long-term budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do a Target boycott on like private entities like Target, y'all don't buy from Target, but the other half of the country does.
Yeah.
Difference by not going to Target. While you'll have the ability to know in your heart that you are doing something because you strongly believe it, if you want actual change, boycotting a private entity might not be the best for you to go. So just think about that when you're planning your boycotts, your protests, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And I will say that, oh, sorry.
Like, there have been some like successful kinds of like protests like this and like protests on corporations. For example, like Starbucks really had a like hurt. It came out that like they were supporting the Israeli military and whatever, and they were just scrambling to control that PR crisis because like their worldwide sales took a hit. Like it came out later that they weren't on the BDS list at all, and they had to come out and prove that they didn't give them money. Coffee operation, like there are coffee shops over there and whatnot. Like it still doesn't help them. Like a lot of people still think that they're on the BDS list, so they do something for them.
I would say though, there are a lot of financial schemes to outlast your protest. So while it will make that initial dent, you got to think these corporations are ever to have access to capital. You can't even imagine. Ever see this amount of money that they can borrow in one day.
Right.
So it is about who can outlast the other person when it comes to these protests.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like saying dairy owners and dairies and outspoken for activism. Like Ben and Jerry's is always supporting Palestine to the point where they actually out of Israel in protest, and then Unilever, which owns Ben and Jerry's, actively trying to sabotage one of their own subsidiaries because they support Israel. So it's like the big company supports Israel, and the company that's being owned by that big company supports Palestine. And this happened, I think, just like last year, before last year.
I would just push back a little bit on the brother's point that boycotts against corporations are totally ineffective, or maybe not as ineffective. One example of this is the anti-apartheid boycotts for South Africa. Those were targeted boycotts on South African companies, and a large reason of why they were so successful is that they resulted in that the DS of the BDS. They tangibly resulted in divestment of larger institutions from South African companies and the South African state, and sanctions on South Africa. So like boycotts also are a part of this concerted larger movement for divestment and sanctions as well.
And I'll also touch on a recent boycott that some of you might seen. So a lot of people have started to know more about the UAE's part in the destabilization in Sudan. And so some of the boycotts that you might have seen is like, don't support the UAE, right? But a lot of people don't know what exactly that means. And so one thing that I would advise is kind of make it more, your form of boycott more direct. So instead of saying, don't buy gold from UAE, you can find out finding out more companies that are directly getting their gold from Sudan, rather than just saying don't buy gold in general. So by saying things like don't support the UAE, sorry, the UAE, you're also you're enabling yourself to play a part in the boycott without necessarily, how do I put this? Critically being engaged without knowing the outcome. I will say, so for example, like we do see the numbers and the hurt in Starbucks, but by saying that don't support the UAE, we don't exactly know what that looks like in form and being in America, especially, you don't really know what that looks like. Knowing that you don't know where a lot of the things come from that you do purchase. So like the gold that you buy, the jewelry, the clothing that you buy, you're not exactly knowing where that comes from. And I will say that another thing is it's good to have optimism. And sometimes it's okay to practice it in ways where you don't exactly know the effect of where your money's not going, but you do know that you're not supporting something that destabilizes countries. Yes. Yeah.
So sovereign wealth they start a company within the US or invest heavily into companies in the US. Finding out what those companies are and avoiding those products is a way of doing them in the book.
Right. Oh, I closed it. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the next topic we're gonna go over is digital organizing. So this is the use of online tools, social media, and digital platforms to mobilize people, spread awareness, and coordinate actions for social and political change. I will say in our generation, this is probably one of the easiest ways to be involved in protesting, because some of the key elements are to for example, keep eyes on Sudan, right? We saw this back in 2019, 2018, and where people were saying that a lot of Sudanese people, sorry, I got nervous. I saw the camera on me. I'm perfect. Sorry.
On our story, or I could just put the larger, not have larger pictures. I'm just going, if you're not comfortable with that. If anyone is not, you can either talk to me after or just expand.
Okay. That's okay.
No, I think we're, but we'll check in with you if anyone tells me.
Sorry, you could take pictures. I didn't mean to.
No, you're good.
Sorry, sorry. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Disrupting.
No, I'm not disrupting.
Practice.
Okay. So some of the key elements for digital organizing is to break media out, blackouts, let me start again. Some key elements for digital organizing is to break media blackouts, connect the diaspora and allies, and counteract misinformation. A very good example that you see for Sudan is keep eyes on Sudan. So what was happening was there were media blackouts in Sudan. So the internet was being taken away from them. Phone line towers were being knocked down. And so that kind of cut the communication with Sudanese people from the outside world. And so the hashtag Keep Eyes on Sudan was created to connect solidarity with Sudanese people. And also just to keep the activism and the journalism going instead of just, you don't see what's going on your feed for a couple of days, you kind of forget it exists. And so I think keeping eyes on Sudan was a very, very nice movement that we saw. We even saw it amongst like celebrities. So I can't exactly remember who, but I know people like Daniel Caesar, artists like her and Corday, they had like a performance, I believe, on the Grammys or the Oscar, where they were saying keep eyes on Sudan at the end. So I think these types of media campaigns can be moved into the Western world. It's just adapting it over time. And one thing that I think would be beneficial was instead of saying keep eyes on Sudan, would be saying hands off of Sudan, right? Keeping eyes on Sudan is saying, be aware and watching what's going on, but saying hands off of Sudan is saying you cannot take our resources and kill our people and get away with it and think that this is okay. And so I also wanted to, in a way, it connects the diaspora with us because you can't necessarily see like the change right away, but civilians, whether they ask for it or not, in a way, it's kind of like you're not going to ask for help, but you know that you need help. So they know that the power we have with our media, and so I feel like keeping eyes on Sudan and hands off of Sudan is their way of asking us, hey, we're unable to post how we feel or this change that we want to see, but you have the power to, so you should use it. So does anybody have any good examples of digital organizing that you've seen like recently on your social media or anything like that that you wanted to share?
I think of one back in 2009 in response to the Great Recession that happened in the US. It was basically this bubble that was being basically after the Great Recession, a lot of Americans were basically put out of jobs, and this created the Tea Party movement, and people angry at the government because, well, the government did fix the whole recession thing. It resulted in the banks responsible for the recession being bailed out, and then Americans across the country were not happy with it because they just saw it as the government caring more about the bankers rather than the average.
Right.
From what I read, there was basically online chatter regarding groups of people getting together, and then what started off as loosely connected became like organized. And then it manifested into one large movement which had no leader, just like almost every American protesting against the government. Which became the Tea Party movement, basically. That was sort of like back when social media was not used commonly, but this was like an example of a large protest against an actual good cause.
Right. Oh yeah.
Plus, the government itself is pretty much responsible for the Great Recession because this is like decades of deregulation of banks, which resulted in the bubble that burst in 2000.
Yeah, people losing homes, jobs.
Yeah,
that's the whole reason my family's in Texas. Honestly, yeah, like
honestly same.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like gonna push back on that keep eyes on Sudan a little bit. I'll tell you why. Because like everybody just turning their profile pictures blue. I actually did so much like recognition. You know, like I remember the first day it happened. I went on my Instagram and I just see like would know what's going on, or even turn their like profile pictures blue because they seen Rihanna had done it. And they went and went and searched it up and seen like what was happening. So like like that affect like has an impact. It's like word out. So I really like that. But and I know there's a lot of people talking about turning your profile pictures blue to save Sudan. Amen. It's something better than nothing, right?
Yeah, I mean it's like the Tea Party where the government had to actually fix the problems because the people were angry, and they managed. It's a perfect example of the people having more power than the government.
I mean, if you go and like search up, for example, if you've seen that, search up Sudan, the first picture you saw was like somebody getting like killed or something like that. That would be like really moving,
Yeah.
I would push back on your pushback, and because like for example, Coney 2012, that was a really foundational example of how awareness, simply being aware of an issue, doesn't solve anything for anyone, doesn't do anything for anyone, because that was just an awareness campaign. But can you tell me what happened in 2012?
Apparently, the people who were chasing after Coney tried to go after him, but he managed to somehow get loose, basically. Well, most of the people who worked for him were basically dead. It was just Coney on his own.
With the digital piece, you would definitely have to attach that to like the actual protests on the ground. Because I think part of the Arab Spring, a lot of it cascaded because of posts on social media.
I'll say this, like push back on.
Inception.
I'll say this, this is kind of like basically a little bit what we were talking about a little bit earlier with BLM. Like it's like in my view is that like if that whole ordeal helped at least one person understand how see it as worth it.
Yeah.
Some people don't see it that way.
That's fair.
But like it's kind of like with the BLM. So like the concession of like the small one with body cams, one person, say a lot popped out, they can see it. Like I can't do this. Then it's worth it. But some people would really like outcomes more than like just one person seeing it. And that's like a valid point of view. Right. If you're just protesting without an outcome, what's the use of all of
Yeah, and I will say I feel like that's I think that's an issue within our community specifically. From I hope they don't get mad at me, but the older generation, I think sometimes they can be just like a little dismissive of causes that people are trying to put on. So I do try to encourage the youth to be involved in any way that they see is positive. So it doesn't necessarily mean following the trend, right? Like if you see everyone's going to one event, and you see that it's beneficial, but sorry. It's okay. And you see that it's beneficial, but you feel like there's ways that you can help out. Just because you don't have the huge group of people that you're looking for to make it come to light doesn't mean you can't just take like 2 or 3 friends, or for example like your work friends. Everybody has like people who are not Sudani that they work with, you know what I mean? So kind of educating them. So we're gonna go over.
We have two things in the chat really
go
quick. Target the boycotts to something specific, or people are misguided. That's what Mona said in the chat. Riley said in the chat, I agree in general, but it is worth saying that most consumption in this country comes from the top 10%, which wasn't the case during the campaign against apartheid. Well, this is the pushback against anti-apartheid boycotts against the companies. So a popular boycott probably does have somewhat less of a role than 30 or 40 years ago. Just got to figure that into our strategic thinking. It's a really great point, Riley. Yeah.
Like a large, well, there was like a large one against just recent immigration policies. So a lot of like Latino specifically just getting together. I don't know if it was like specifically like I don't remember. But I know that was happening.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what I liked from that movement was that everyone knows that like America's like this huge boiling pot, right? So when you start to take out like, I think of it as like a soup. You start taking out, ingredients and vegetables from a soup. Like, is it really as good? So I feel like that was in a way, that's such a terrible analogy. I'm sorry. That's corny.
I get it.
But yeah, it's just, right. It comes down to the seasoning. So I feel like quite literally, right. What is a soup without broth? You know what I mean? So I feel like movements like that, it was really nice to see like they know their worth in this country. Yeah, I think that's a really good example of digital organizing that we've seen lately. So just to touch back on the 4 major forms of protest. Okay, you guys can see. For mass action, the objective is to show collective strength, disrupt regular life, and mobilize. Some of the benefits of this is that it's hard to ignore, right? Mass action. I'm like a lot. So some of the benefits of mass action is it's hard to ignore. If you guys ever drive, which Texas driving, it's its own thing. But if you drive on like Highway 75 and you see that bridge, UTD is known for protesting out there and putting out Palestinian flags. So things like that, you're stuck in traffic, it's hard to ignore what's going on around you. Attracting media attention and creating momentum for change. The thing that I really like about mass action is it forces people to not be ignorant. I will say that. Because a lot of people you'll ask them about a major issue, or like you'll ask them, do you know anything about Sudan? And their main thing is like, oh, I just haven't heard anything about it, or like, I don't really know anything about it. It's like, do you not know anything about it, or have you not been asking questions, or do you just not care to know at all? And then some of the risks of mass action is that it can be met with police or military violence and repression. So we see that in protests all the time. And even the example that we talked about, like George Floyd, people were trying to create this harmonious well of positivity within the city of Minneapolis. And so being met by the government saying, we're basically taking back their land and saying like, we understand the importance of the movement, but business, capitalism does have to go back to what it is. Direct action. So some of the objectives is to force immediate change, create alternative solutions. And some of the benefits of that is directly impacting the oppressive systems and demonstrating people's power. One thing that I think we touched on in our group was that it's my belief that we see all these great movements and protests that the Palestinian community is doing in DFW. But I would argue that I feel like the Sudanese community has as much potential to create as much change as they have. And that's not to create a competition or anything like that, but I feel like I see the importance in their movement and the beauty in their movement, and I like to see that amongst our community as well. Just we do have the numbers. I don't think we live in a city where, you know, Sudanese people just don't exist. We have aunts, we have uncles, we have friends that also have big families, and I feel like all it takes is mobilizing them and coming together in places like this, like the Jalia, to create change. Some of the risks of that is that you can be seen as confrontational, may lead to arrest, violence, or legal consequences. Just because mobilization, you know, you're bringing a lot of different people together, but you're also bringing a lot of different emotions. We see that like amongst our parents. For example, town hall meetings where they come together and they talk about, you know, topics that they're discussing on their phones or online. People have difference in opinions, and so bringing them all together, it may be confrontational, it may lead to arrest or legal consequences. So just being more aware of that. Boycotting, the objective is to financially weaken oppressive institutions. Oh, sorry.
Just add like direct action also is like specifically and intentionally doing things that are against the law. So and that's part of this civil disobedience, doing it because you understand that the law is unjust and yet doing it. And that's why there is certain precautions that you follow when you're doing a direct action. But there is like power in numbers, and there's that it contains a lot of power.
And to add to that, you know, not everyone has to put themselves in a compromising position. If you know that your, you know, residency status or your citizenship status puts you in a vulnerable position, people should not be asking you, and you shouldn't be agreeing to doing things that you know are illegal, because that will compromise your safety and your ability to live here. And if that's, you know, important to you, it probably is. But you know, we'll talk about this in the community organizing section, but when you form coalitions specifically with allies, maybe white people or people who have more inherent power, they can take on those more risky behaviors and put themselves in positions where they are actively, you know, knowing that they are taking on the risk of being arrested, and they're willing to do that because they have the power and privilege to be able to do that and know that they can be bailed out and they don't have to suffer the consequences as much as someone who's in a more vulnerable position would have to.
Yeah. And it's also very important, because you'll be doing an exercise shortly where you organize your own protest, is when you're an organizer, letting people know what the risks are. And there's ways that you can say this without explicitly saying this is against the law, or we're doing something, admitting to something, doing something illegal, because that can be used against you later. But there's ways that you can say that, and we'll cover that.
Oh, my bad. I was also going to add, also like doing things that are illegal on property. It kind of delegitimizes the movement a little bit, but also like.
Can I ask, sorry, when you say that, you know, are you saying like it takes away from the credibility of the movement, or?
It'll take what they call
Okay, so alienating people.
I agree with that.
That's fair. Yeah.
Black and Muslim.
Yes, that's a really good point. Like you could alienate like a white population, and then it's mostly those that are most at risk that are taking on this risk. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when like when it's being pushed on the forefront. Like I will say, because you meet a lot of people who aren't law-abiding citizens that don't, you know, have any intentions of breaking the law, but then they're met with like groups that are like, they want to be involved, but they don't know that it's necessarily like the safest option, because it's like, does it go against my morals, or, you know, things that I believe. To touch back on digital organizing, so spreading awareness on a wide scale and counter propaganda. One thing that I'm gonna go back to the New Collective event, because I really did like it, was that they put out media sources, I believe, with captions that created, I will say like it created
Like
misinformation about what's going on in Sudan. And so I feel like that was an effective tool that I learned that day personally, was that just because you see something tied to a national news source that's like widely known doesn't necessarily make it true. You have to realize that articles come from authors. Authors are people. People have bias. And so I feel like each time you're reading something on the media, you should also be doing your job to make sure that they're a credible source. Just so that you're being counterproductive towards propaganda that may be putting out there, and not making yourself gullible to what you see. So some of the benefits of digital organizing are creating global audience reach. It's very easy to participate in, especially our generation, Gen Z, everybody has, some form of social media, in my opinion. And then keeping issues visible. Some of the risks of that are censorship. So a lot of people, you might have seen, like, across just Instagram in general, I would say, a lot of people were saying that their content was being censored. They'll post a picture of themselves and they'll get like 50 views, and then they'll post something about like a cause, and so it'll get like 5 views or something like that. And then surveillance. That's a big thing that a lot of people have been saying. I think, well, I can't speak on someone else's experience, but people have been saying that they've been, under surveillance for the participation that they take in not just digital organizing, but also in mass action like protest. A lot of people have been targeted, people have been arrested. You see cases of, I'm trying to remember his name, Mahmoud Khalid. Mahmoud Khalid. Okay, so seeing that his story being pushed out there, and also doxing. A lot of people think that they're safe behind their phones and safe behind their walls of their home just because we're in America, but on the other end of that, we're in America, especially in Texas. Guys, gun laws, they're very insane. So I feel like a lot of people do have a fear of digital organizing based off of those risks.
Yeah.
And did you?
I had posted like a video on my story of like the army guys, and he was like, I think he was rapid firing his AK-47 style. And like I got my Instagram account like restricted.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't comment, like, or
Which is insane.
That is crazy.
I used to contract for Meta, like during the peak of when
Really?
everything in Sudan was like restricted. And it was in their policy to the point where like small business owners, like Sudanese, like based in Sudan, if their IP came from there, they literally were not allowed to post like to have like a business page or like marketplace anything really. Like it was that extensive. It wasn't even just users, like even business owners were restricted from even making a living.
Yeah, and I've also heard stories about certain social media ever since the whole Palestine-Israel thing, where anything that's being posted about Palestine positive lies either being censored or being pushed as something harmful.
So as a lawyer who defends people, has defended people against political persecution, prosecuting specifically their actions and protests, the biggest thing that I advise around digital organizing is that don't post anything online, like post everything that you're posting online with the understanding that the government is seeing it, everything that you post publicly, and operate from that framework. Like that is the risk that you're willing to take on. And you have to understand that is the risk you're willing to take on, because all of these cases used social media posts for the evidence.
Don't overtly support any militia group, whether it be government or an organization fighting their government. You'll get on the terrorist list for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but just understanding the risks involved. Yeah.
And they might not even be like immediate, right? There are things that can follow you for the rest of your life. So just like with social media, people say that, the internet lasts forever. I think it really does. We've seen examples of that countless of times. And so before we get to our activity, the last topic to go over was planning and executing mass actions. Yeah, we can. Yeah. So okay, so I'm gonna speak on this one and then I'm gonna go to the roles, the green roles real quick. So planning and executing. A lot of people don't know what it takes to behind the scenes putting on protests. It's easy to just show up. But there are a lot of things that go into it. So legally, there's permits, right? You have to be in compliance with the city that you're hosting the protest in. There's different roles that people have to take. For example, a lot of people don't know that like a legal observer is a role in a protest. That's something you can ask an organization to be a part of, just to make sure you're in compliance with the law, number one. And the role is solely just to observe. So a lot of people do get worried that when they go to protest, do I have to speak? Do I have to chant? Do I have to do anything? And so there are roles where you explicitly don't have to do any of those things. You can merely just be there to observe. There's the meeting, the planning, and communication. So if you're someone who does want to get involved in protests, there are safety precautions to make sure that you are safe from things like doxing or retaliation for your involvement. And some examples of that would be to have messaging be off of your phone number. So there's apps like WhatsApp. There's also different apps that help you speak to people discreetly without your phone number being out there for other people to have access to. And so that just kind of creates more safety and security. Real quick, I wanted to go over the direct actions.
That one of those apps is Signal, but also WhatsApp. They're both encrypted. And so Signal is secure. That's why Trump is using it with all his people, because they can't get records from Signal. Yeah. And then if you want to be a legal observer or get legal observers at a protest that you're organizing, you contact the National Lawyer Skill. That's the organization.
Oh, see, I didn't even. That's crazy. I've done that. I didn't know.
And there are a lot of, to my knowledge, like college students who are legal observers.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the thing I like, that being from college students, like it's very accessible. You can speak to people you're within your age group and they'll put you on to things that just like so I had to can you repeat the website one more time?
National Lawyers Guild, the organization.
National Lawyers Guild.
Yep, National Lawyers Guild.
National Lawyers Guild.
And anyone can be a legal observer. You don't have to be a lawyer or a legal.
Yeah, and there's different roles, not even just a legal observer. You can be directing traffic or helping with distributing items to the protesters. One thing that I wanted to tie it to was the sit-ins that you see at colleges. And so I think it segues great into this topic. So there's risk assessment, right? There's different roles that you can take to ensure that you're being safe when you're protesting. So green roles are roles in protests where you're not necessarily playing a direct role in the protest. I think the example to use for this would be like the sit-ins that you see at colleges, right? Those college students, they sit out there in those tents for like 12, 24 plus hours, days even on end. And so you have to think about how they're being fed, right? How they're getting the items that they need to stay alive, getting water. So an example of a green role would be providing those items. So you're sitting in your car across the street while the sitting is going on, but you want to help. So you take a case of water, you walk it over there, you put it down, you leave, right? It's a safe way to be involved without necessarily risking yourself. A yellow roll is one where there is more involvement, but the risk isn't necessarily as big. So an example would be, say you're at a protest, right? And then you see police come with like tear gas or anything like that. You retreat immediately, but you still want to help. So you can take on a green role. So if you find yourself feeling unsafe at a protest or a sit-in or anything like that, you can leave, come back, bring some supplies to help out the people who are still actively protesting in the red roles. And the red roles are people who are okay with taking the risks, right? There's people who are willing to go to jail, who don't care for catching a charge for their involvement in protests. Yes.
I want to add I guess this could be any, well, this could be, I'm not even sure which one it is.
No, it's okay.
During the 2020 George Floyd protest
Mhm.
Dallas, and like you can do something simple as, like a lot of people have like a whole bunch of milk that they bought in case somebody got tear gas, and like they would just give you milk so you can pour it on your eye just to help like ease irritation.
Exactly.
Not to like for the red rolls, I guess this is another one. I met like a militia of like these white guys that were like 15 downtown.
Okay.
To be there to protect the protesters. Like one of the cops like shot a fire off into the crowd or something.
Right.
So like, they took on the risk because they know that they're like, white, so they could like probably escape just easier.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a great example.
I think the example of the people who had like milk jugs, I think that's a perfect example of like the yellow rolls, because although they put themselves in the line of fire of also being tear gassed, because you never know when it's going to be thrown at you, but they still were willing to help and provide supplies. And then back to the red rolls, somebody who's willing to risk it all. You see a lot of students at UTD were being arrested, and within 24 hours there were GoFundMe pages created for them to get legal aid to get them out. And so I wanted to stress that it's very important to have legal support in these forms of protest. So knowing a lawyer,
Yeah,
knowing a lawyer is really
beforehand.
nice. Not necessarily Suad. I'm not putting her up for it.
Contact me.
But
If
if you do have questions, knowing that you have people that you can go to for legal questions. And it's always kind of good to have somebody who can sort of be like a precaution for legal support. So if you're thinking about doing something, right, you don't know if it's against the law, you don't know what kind of trouble you can get into, having someone that you can go to, and then having, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And lawyers can oftentimes, or like a legal team doesn't even need to be a lawyer, it can just be like a bunch of legal professionals or even jail support team, can plan ahead for arrests and like understand that there's going to be someone that's calling the jail to get everyone in touch with a lawyer. That's going to be that someone's going to be making sure that they have all the names of the people who are arrested, and there's a whole team of people keeping track of you, so you're not just alone in jail, you don't have a lawyer,
Yeah, having someone like readily available too, just in case something does happen. And then also coordinating a police contact. So when planning protests, a lot of the time the city does encourage you to get in contact with the police so that they can have like barricades set up. They can know what streets to shut down if you're planning on having a protest, and they can also keep away people that may want to harm the protesters. And then also, like Suad said, coordinating with lawyers and or legal aid organizations. There are a lot of legal aid organizations that are willing to help protesters free of charge even sometimes. So that's really important. And then also legal observers. These are people who, to define like a legal observer, they're people who don't play an active role because they still have to be in contact with the law should something happen. So if you're at a protest and you see that, somebody threw a can of soda into the crowd, right? You're not involved, but you were able to identify that person until you help the police should they have questions for things like that.
Riley in chat said, using the example of college encampments, yellow rolls would be those who say actually go into the encampment to supply those red rolls with the goods, and the green rolls provide. And and otherwise are there as part of the protest to protect the main work. The red rolls, in this case, those in the tents, are up to.
Sorry, say that one more time.
And otherwise are there as part of the protest to protect the main work. The red rolls are up to. That's what the yellow roll would be doing.
Oh,
Like,
okay, okay.
looking out and yeah.
Yeah. And I would say even with like the green rolls, like there's some people who, if it's happening during a work day, you know what I mean? Like they can't get out of work, but they'll send money to somebody who can get the supplies that they need. And so I think that's it. We're gonna move into our interactive exercise.
So for this workshop, pizza is here. So we'll use this break time to also organize your own protest. Whilst get some pizza. Fortunately, it doesn't look we have a ton of water bottles. But just snacks, pizza, and take a break here before our next session, which is going to be Shams leading us through our as resistance, and then Sada leading us through long-term community organizing. And I'll let Mawadda lead this exercise.
Thank you. Before I do get into this exercise, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you ladies for putting this event on. My involvement was not from the beginning. I cannot take credit for this this presentation whatsoever. I have to accredit it to Amina Mahfouz. She's on the Zoom call. She did a great job of breaking this down. And honestly, I was struggling with ways to put input myself, because I was like, what's not on this presentation? Like, mashallah, she's really done everything. So I just wanted to say a huge shout out to you guys for this. Could not have done it without you guys. So for our interactive, oops, wrong side. So for the interactive exercise, you're gonna organize a protest. Let's do this real quick. So I'm probably gonna have you guys get into groups of 3. Let's say because there's 3 main tables right now, so probably tables of 3. Feel free to move around if you'd like to. Okay. So it's basically kind of like a workshop to create your own protest. The location is up to you. But you're gonna choose essential demand. So you're gonna ask yourselves, what change do you want to see? So if any of you guys have it's in here, the questions that we want you guys to ask. So what change do you want to see in essential demand? Number 2, you're gonna pick a protest type. So whether it's digital organizing, mass action, direct action, or boycotting. And then you're going to delegate roles and plan logistics. So who's going to be doing what materials do you need? Who do you need to get in contact with? You're going to assess risks and plan safety measures. So what challenges might arise? We talked about a couple of them. And then you're going to present and give feedback. So we're going to give you guys a few minutes to kind of get that all together. If you have any questions, please ask us. And then we're going to come back and see what you guys have come up with. So thank you.
And there's 3 blank pages at the end of your toolkits if you want to take notes on that.
Do they have a toolkit on the Zoom meeting?
They do not.
No,
Yeah,
okay.
they're gonna get it afterwards.
Okay.
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 So those on Zoom, if you want to participate, you're definitely welcome to either put in chat or get off mute to participate in the exercise. Otherwise,
Yeah,
take a break and come join us for the second portion of this presentation.
The
Thanks so
question?
much
Oh, okay.
for being here with us. This is the break and activity at the same time.
Yeah, you did awesome.
How many, is it like, what were the groups? Is it just like the table? Or like
Yeah,
like
just
smaller-
probably 3. If any of you guys want to join this table though, I mean,
So maybe it could be like 3 and 4.
or maybe 2.
Oh, yeah, I don't
I
have
think
the
we'll do
ones for
2.
that.
Zainab, do you guys mind joining this table actually? Okay, thank you. I think so, yeah. I think we're just gonna have 2, yeah. Yeah, probably just 2 groups.
Can you do a timer on here actually?
Yeah, I can do it on my phone.
No, Shana Shufu.
Oh. Sorry, guys, we were just discussing. Sorry. You didn't miss anything, I promise.
So Ahmed and Muna, I think y'all are gonna be working together to plan a protest. Oh, and Riley, so sorry about that. And we'll be reconvening in what, like 10 minutes? 15?
I think so. Sorry, how many minutes did you say? I was maybe like 10.
10 minutes?
Or is that pushing it? It could be longer. It's up to you. I just don't know how much time we have.
It's for 10 minutes and then people can still eat up.
Yeah. Okay, so in 10 minutes we will be back. Is it about Sudan specifically? Is it about Sudan? Yeah, it's about Sudan specifically, right?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Right, y'all, we're reconvening.
Would you like, Shams, would you like, I'm here to have the outline just here for you?
Outline of what? Like,
The presentation if you want it.
can I have the Canva actually?
Definitely.
Thanks so much.
Okay, guys, so we're gonna start sharing some of our responses that we got from the activity. Does anybody want to start first? With sharing their idea, so.
Those are with 3 groups. We had 1 online, and then 2 in person.
Okay. So the online one, is it? They got their stuff in there?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. So we're gonna start with the Zoom group that's online. To read out, sorry. So again, the questions, designing your own protest, you're supposed to choose a central demand, pick a protest type, delegate roles and plan logistics, assess risks and plan safety measures, and then present and get feedback. So feel free to add any feedback after the person's finished presenting. We're gonna start with our associates here on the Zoom call.
I can kind of, so it looks like they're thinking on a mass action, or mass action that's disruptive, so maybe direct action a little bit
Okay.
at the Emirati consulates. And this would be to directly affect state policy. Affecting that is probably harder to do in the end, but there's less layers between the protest and the policy compared to protesting a private company, because they were considering whether it should be a private company or the consulate. Yeah, that's online folks. And Mona said she would be a chant leader.
Okay, okay. Okay. I like that. What do you guys think? I like that. Like targeting I like that because it makes it very direct. Yeah. Agreed. Does anyone have any feedback? They have a new message.
For the purpose of spreading awareness.
She said, of course, I'll be the chant lead. Okay. Good answer. Okay. I really like this idea on Zoom, guys. You guys did great.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start with this side to see. Yeah, I heard y'all was yapping over here. What did y'all come up with?
First before you need to kill someone or something.
Oh. Okay.
Let's remember the 4 options. I don't
Yeah.
remember that being one of them.
You can answer for any one of them. I'm gonna put y'all on the spot just a little bit more. What's to add?
So essentially, our protests, we want to fight the wealth disparity in the United States by targeting the people who make the most amount of money, like people of influence.
Okay.
For lack of better words, rich white men.
Okay.
So we wanted to, we specifically looked at like Amazon, was the big company of our distaste. We wanted to start by shopping smart. So like we mentioned like tripods and stuff, maybe like, making your own tripod at home, or like.
Oh,
Are you laughing?
no, I dropped my phone. I dropped my phone.
This is serious, man.
I'm not laughing. I promise.
This is the actual protest.
Okay.
This is a direct action because you're
So,
just
So
Closing your own.
another thing was insurance companies. We are not taking inspiration because I know this was recorded, but we thought of Luigi Mangione.
Oh.
So we were thinking of like insurance companies, so people who were like potentially doing unjust things. And we saw that like what he did was within reason. That's why he believed that he did it. Not everyone agrees with that.
allegedly, there hasn't been a trial yet.
Right. There's no trials. There's
Probable cause.
Um,
Yes.
we don't want to make it violent. We want to start. Local businesses, that type of thing. Businesses who are not, like small businesses who are not influenced by like the big, venture capital firms and banks and that type of thing. If we do become, very famous and stuff, and we promote it through social media, maybe even protest music, that type of thing. We are willing to be, on that watch list or whatever.
Okay.
Potentially like green role, let's say, there's some people that we want to delegate, like friends here, if it's not me, but
Are you delegating them?
absolutely.
Who's Who's the crash out? Who's the crash out within the group?
Okay, so, and do they know the risk? Do they know the risk?
Oh my God. Okay.
Essentially, no, jokes aside, I think it's like kind of knowing where you're shopping and where you're spending your hard-earned money.
Agreed. Right. On what? Right.
So that's the idea of
Okay.
I like that. Smoke
Give
it
him
prawns.
a round of applause. Just for some feedback from the Zoom, somebody said, free that man. Somebody said, yeah, innocent until proven guilty. And then for their idea, they were saying, wow, we're over here trying to be non-confrontational. Meanwhile, they're over here talking about this. But yeah, just some feedback from the Zoom. I like that idea. Does anyone have any feedback that they'd like to share? You know.
Oh, okay.
Okay. On the record. On the record, this is going on the Decolonize Sudan website. Okay. And so we're gonna have this group. Sorry, Shamsi saw me in the face. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have this side of the room share. Sorry, you won't be up here. Sorry.
Someone online said they think it lacks a specific target.
Yeah.
They didn't mention Amazon.
Amazon, is it?
But what's the alternative to like the?
I think they.
Scoop.com. That's like Alibaba.
Alibaba. Okay.
Tripod from Amazon last week. So instead of doing that, go to your backyard, put down a tree.
Oh my God.
Take your wood board.
Or branches.
That's really valid, yeah. My husband uses a lot of tripods, so maybe he can.
Right.
It's a work in progress.
Okay.
Well, the feedback is well
Okay.
taken.
Yeah. Well, we encourage hearing back from you guys. If y'all make this a full-fledged protest. Ladies. Let me make it more general. Put you all on. Do y'all have anyone would like to share the protest idea? See you. Guys, we talked about a couple of ideas. Anyone want to share them?
Is kind of doing it online necessarily and shopping more so
Sorry.
No, you're okay. Shopping locally and making like bringing visibility towards Sudani companies or like Sudani businesses and small businesses, and stop buying gold from UAE companies.
Right.
I have a list if y'all want it.
We will be sure that.
Yeah. I have a list.
Yeah.
It's only 4 so far, but still doing my research.
That's okay.
Huh?
In
No,
DFW,
in
just
general.
Can we bring you into Decolonize Sudan research team? Because that's something we're working on.
I'm not from here, but sure.
No, but it's just online.
Okay.
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I get you.
Okay.
I'm gonna get your information.
The connections. I think another idea that we spoke about was that was both of them, right? That was
The small business.
yeah, the small business. Supporting local businesses. So instead of there's a lot of Sudani owned businesses in DFW. We can name a lot of them personally, aunties that we know that make kisra or you know what I mean, sell certain things. Which, by the way, my mom's store, solo store, up the street. So if anyone, clothing, thiab, carinas, perfumes, ingredients, all that kind of stuff. You guys can shop locally. She closes at 8 o'clock, so she opens at 10 o'clock tomorrow. So I'm just saying. Yeah, my mom's store. But yeah, just kind of putting more into our local businesses rather than going to this, not to downplay them, other ethnic marts. For example, Patel Brothers. My mom goes to Patel Brothers all the time, but there's also people who can source those things from and it helps them earn more income so that when the day comes where Sudan is trying to become more stable, they have more income to pull from to send to Sudan. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that we did talk about. Was there anything that I'm forgetting or I think.
Oh, Lockheed Martin. That's the like brain processor. It's based in Dallas. So when we're to be like
What does Lockheed Martin do?
Arms to
Like arms dealers.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyone who works there can't even describe what they're doing.
What they do, severance.
Yeah.
I know in San Antonio, it's like I'm not exactly sure what Valero has. I didn't do more research on it, but I know Valero is kind of involved in
Valero, like the gas station. Oh, okay, okay.
They're involved with complicit in genocide in Palestine, and protests were happening. They shut down like Valero headquarters, which was right next to the school. So a bunch of students from UTSA went down to walk over to Valero and just shut down the highway. And it's like a major intersection between I-10 and like 16 and 4. But that brought like, what does Valero have to do with like kind of put the question on me.
Right.
That could be reflected upon like,
I like that. And that's a local campaign too. I like that.
Yeah. But okay. Overall, the feedback was great. I love the ideas. If anybody wants to mobilize and make it a real thing, you have this room of people who will support you. Maybe not push like the radicalization just as much up front, but hey, if you want to, it's a free country. Somebody in the Zoom also said, which is also relevant to us having the ability to go back and rebuild everything, that time to make those investments in our new Sudan is now. I agree. We already see our parents sending money to Sudan, right? So just creating a structure and where they're not destabilizing their financial stability here to help Sudan. So looking for outside resources, I think, is very important. I think you guys all touched on it. I do think that's the end of part of the presentation.
Thank you so much.
Another shout out to Amina. Couldn't have done this without her. So yeah, thank you guys.
Taking this on to last minute. We appreciate you. Okay, I'm gonna do Shams, you want to sit here and I'm gonna pull up the screen. Then you can just press the screen or you can press
okay, can you see the notes section?
Yeah.
Is it just this one right? Okay, I got it. Okay, actually, hold on. Okay, there we go. All right, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shams. We have about 30-ish minutes, so I'm gonna keep mine very short because I actually want to focus a lot more on my activity. Just because I'm a teacher and I'm a big believer in like execution rather than okay. All right, so my section is about the arts as resistance, and I'm gonna break it up in 2 sections. I want to talk about how you can use art for your own life and how you can resist in your own like personal like ways, and then we can also talk about art as resistance as a whole. And a really good example was what Moda had mentioned earlier was the George Floyd Square. That in itself is an example of like more like larger scale art as resistance. So there are 3 types of modalities that I want to talk about. So we're going to talk about visual audio storytelling, basically how to be ethical when you're telling a story through visual and audio. We're going to talk about imagery, which includes cartoons, political cartoons specifically, murals, and photography. And my specialty, which because I feel okay, and then written language, so poetry and essays, and how you can use that as resistance as well. So for the video and audio storytelling, I want us to go ahead and just watch this one clip. If you want to click on the word authentic, it should play a Google Drive. Hopefully volume works.
So let me do it.
Okay, thank you. You try to put the volume. No. No, it should be on.
One sec, Zoom people.
Hold on. I think it's my, can I have my phone actually? I think it's my hotspot.
Can y'all hear? Is there audio in the beginning of the video?
It's very quiet, but there is.
Okay.
Maybe you can right click and then. Oh. Oh, yes.
Audio, 1 second.
Sudanese resistance, but it's still relevant to us because I wanted to talk about how when you're using visual audio art, it can evoke a sense of urgency. The video starts off in pure darkness and pitch blackness, and it actually opens up with a quote by the Somali poet Morsin Shire. And I think the quote is, "No one flees the mouth of a shark unless the shark, or no one flees from your house unless the home is the mouth of a shark," or something like that. So it's a beautiful, poem that she wrote. And so the reason why I'm showing this video is to basically talk about how the impact of storytelling, specifically with video, really depends on who is behind the camera. And from here, who can we assume is filming this?
Someone who's actively a part of the situation.
Right, it's going to be our primary source, someone who's actively here. And so one of the ways that we can resist is by uplifting direct sources, either direct video footage or direct creative projects from people on the ground, whether it's in Philistine, Syria, Sudan, wherever else in the world, and giving agency to them, okay? And the reason why this is an act of resistance is because it shifts the narrative, okay? Instead of it being, oh, there's people across the world that are not able to feed themselves, like some Sudanese who are not able to feed themselves this Ramadan. It's an actual video footage of a family videotaping with no food around them when they're about to break their fast. That in itself can be turned or can be used as a way to resist through video art. And so I wanted to just open up with this video, but I want to talk about how video can also tell more of a positive story and how we can resist in a more joyous way. So we'll move on to the next slide. And we'll play the Saros only for a little bit though, because you know. And we can go back to the camera. And so, what do you guys think of when you think of Saros? Some words that pop into y'all's heads. Confidence, good. What else? Tradition, good. What else?
Art.
Art, in what way? You said art.
Dancing is art.
Okay, dancing. Dance is performing.
Alpha is art.
Has anyone watched videos like this and get this sense of like nostalgia? Even if like you've never been married yourself, just like this nostalgia for this experience or for our mothers or grandmothers who've had it. And so this is another angle of visual storytelling being resistance. We're resisting by still practicing joy in times of genocide and times of war. Okay, and in Sudan, even I've known literally people who've had weddings in Mosul, even after being displaced, literally like losing all their money or spending all their money to be able to cross the border into Egypt, are still celebrating and resisting through having these weddings in whatever way that they're able to, despite like not having the financial mobility. And so just video archives like this is another way that can place us back in time, but it's also a way to show us that resistance isn't just through like mass mobilization. It could be small, intimate circles where you're able to cultivate like love and happiness and all these like warm feelings that we talked about. The other type of resistance is through imagery. Okay, so I just wanted you guys to take a few moments, just look at the 3 photos here. One is in a museum that I was in Chicago, that's on the far left. The one in the middle is a mural, and it's also a protest, it's a sit-in. And on the right is a cartoon by Khalid al-Bey. So back to that other slide, I'm sorry. So on the left, this is a collection. It was a museum exhibit of dictators and their fists, okay? There are no faces. Which one here is Ahmed Bashir? On the far left. Which fist is the dictator for Sudan? Which one? Okay.
Is it the bottom right?
Which one bottom right?
The one in the middle.
The one in the middle.
Oh.
The one in the middle is Ahmed Bashir.
Seems
Okay.
so.
So I want us to think about, why are they not showing the faces of these dictators? Why is it their hands?
Because they're all basically the same, basically using power to oppress their own people.
Doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter who they are, if they're all doing the same thing at the end of the day, right? And so this is another way of how we can like manipulate the angle even of imagery, okay, and use it to tell a story. And the story here is, we could not, in fear maybe perhaps of persecution, exile, and all the martyrs who have died in like lieu of protesting against Bashir. This is another way that we can protest and resist, is by talking about, it kind of in some ways dehumanizes him. We don't even care which hand it is, because they're all the same in some way. They're all the same. And on the far right is Khalid al-Bey, which is one of my favorite cartoonists. You guys had talked about Ala, the one with the white toe. So he uses a lot of like symbolism, like Sudanese symbolism, colors, taubes, and to basically like send a message out. And it's very clear, obviously, what he's trying to send with this cartoon. All right, next slide. All right, I want to talk about this idea of co-creation. So we had talked a lot about like, Moda had talked a lot about like mobilizing, and I know Sada, you will as well. There's a way that you can mobilize through art, and it's through co-creation, okay? So co-creation builds communities because it forces us to rely on the shared responsibility between all of us to resist war, occupation, and the proxy involvement, okay? One example is this woman named Tanzir Abdullah Adam. She was right in the middle of the rogue shelling of all the war, and she was able to escape, I believe, to Rwanda. I don't want to misspeak, but I think it was to Rwanda. And she's an artist. And a year or two after, she founded this group called Mayhem, which is an all-women street artist group, okay? This is a great example of co-creation because she's cultivating a space for women artists to come and resist together through art. I really love her work. It's really beautiful, subhanAllah. And at this point, it's even surpassed like gender. It's like all Sudanese people, refugees, people that are displaced coming together, doing art workshops. And she even has a master's in, I think, some art discipline as well. So she's able to like actually teach and host these workshops for people. Okay. And then written language. Okay. We talked a lot about propaganda and how I think Moda had talked about Haswad, you were at a talk, right? And a lot of people had misinformation, right? Like they termed it a civil war, or even having inaccurate numbers, right? So this is a way that you can use written language to resist and correct headlines, or even headlines that are purposely trying to like portray some propaganda that's not in our interest. Okay, so here's a headline. This is literally from 2 months ago. So this isn't like from the beginning of 2023 when people didn't know. This is like a month or two ago. The headline begins with Sudan conflict spirals into civil war. Automatically, everyone in this room knows that this is like a crock of BS. You know, it's not a civil war. We know that there's like more into it, right? And so one of the ways we can use writing is when the world is speaking for us, we can reclaim our narrative in a few ways, okay? One of the ways is to take a headline like this, there's so many, but take a headline like this with inaccurate information and respond to it in a form of a poem, preferably in a form of an angry poem, because, yeah. Another way is to write a personal essay about your last memories in Sudan. I know that when we did our icebreaker, a few people said that Sudan means a lot to them because they would spend a lot of their summers there. So that's another way where you're not resisting like outwardly, but it's internally, right? You're resisting by allowing yourself to tap into those emotions and like feel like those like memories, even if like they may be bittersweet because we can't go back at this present moment. And then another way, of course, is to read books by Sudanese authors. And all of these methods can open the dialogue for Sudanese people by Sudanese. And that's the key idea, is that we're resisting for Sudanese, and the resistance is coming primarily through us. It's not coming from like some outside source that's going to dilute it in terms of like not having the full picture. We're authentically trying to honor our stories and our art. On the next slide, I have some recommendations for Sudanese poets. Sophia Al-Hilo, which is a really great mentor of mine. I really look up to her. Amital Mahmoud, she is amazing. And Kaya Tani as well. If you click on the Sophia Al-Hilo, there's on her name. There's a link that should take us to one of her poems. Do we have time to read it? Should I?
It's not open for me.
Okay. Okay, I'm not going to read it, but if you want to click it, I'll give you the name of the poem later. But I do want to talk about the activity that we're going to do, okay? So I'm going to pass out photos of Sudan, okay? They're black and white, so I apologize. My work is colored. I'm going to pass out photos of Sudan, and I want you to take about, let's say, 5-ish minutes and write a poem or a letter to Sudan based on what these like images will look. So here's a bunch of photos, take whichever one you have to call for. And then put it into the.
Can you bring one for the Zoom as well?
So
Okay, so we're gonna take 5 minutes and write a poem to or write a letter or a poem to Sudan. What are your fears, hopes, and why you love her? Oh, okay. Yeah. Wait, Saad, can you let Muna back into the Zoom because it got cut off?
Oh, the Zoom got cut off?
Yeah. Okay, y'all. So we're gonna take 5 minutes and write a poem or a letter to Sudan. And I'm going to put this picture here so that you can look at it. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay. You know what? Maybe, yeah, if you have something online, I can just share my screen. I can just Google it, honestly. Okay.
you shared them.
Yeah. All right, one sec. I'm gonna share my screen so you can see the picture virtually. In the meantime, feel free to get started on your letter or poem. I'm about to share my screen right now. Mm-hmm. Familiar, but I don't know.
He got a cancer. It's, I don't know if it's on TV.
Okay.
My dad.
Okay, y'all, so we're gonna have a few more minutes to do this.
There's about 3 minutes.
Mm.
You need help? Or are you good?
Started writing on the area you can copy.
He was inspired.
Oh my God, they're really fun. I don't want to like go through their shoulder.
Yeah,
So.
maybe someone will share.
Yeah. $90. One minute. 10 seconds. No, looks so teacher coded. I'm sorry. All right.
Drop your pen.
No,
Drop
wait,
your
no.
pens, drop your pens.
Okay. Is anyone willing to share? I don't want to be like weird and like stare down like from across the shoulder, but anyone willing to read? No? Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
So, okay, this may not make sense to you, but okay. So this mine is they're all eating lahma from the pan, and it looks like a bunch of women. They're all eating lahma from the pan. I'll show on mine. They're eating lahma meat from the pan. And I grew up in a household of women that with a lot of joy and joking in our house, but also a lot of cattiness because they're all women. So it's kind of like reflective of that environment. Lahma snatched by hands that reach out to me, hands that pull my hair with a smirk, hands that give me lugma and wipe my tears, hands that need the asida and stay outstretched in prayers, hands that snatch and hands that give.
So beautiful. I love like the contrast between like it's like love, but like, oh, you better get your, like act in shape. But yeah, I love it.
You gotta get your lahma before
Everything.
yeah.
Anyone else would like to share?
Me? Yeah, I didn't say me.
Oh, yeah.
Had like one was like basically a wall of a bunch of fruits, which is like a popular Sudanese string instrument. This one was a man in a dukan, also like a corner store, and this one was a young gentleman sitting or standing, excuse me, in front of a store, which I'm assuming is probably his block. So I wrote about my experience. I had a lot of relatability because I play guitar, my uncle plays oud, and I've had a lot of experience in Sudan, going to the Yukons and stuff. My poem was basically about kind of Sudan's situation and how those pictures made me feel alone but not lonely, discriminated but not defeated, displaced, but always no home. When we hear it, when we see it, and when we feel it. The simplest pleasures are always universal, from the joys of Aghani to your local Dukan order. Al-Balad fi Qalbi.
I love that that's a beautiful take. Like the budded is always in your heart, like no matter, even if you're home, like you left it without food, right? So beautiful.
I just want to say my poem or my letter also talked about the music and the dukkan. So universal Sudani experience.
Literally. Okay, so we have a few comments. Riley had said, I have a lot of ideas about Sudan, but I'm really struggling to piece them into something coherent. But I'm thinking about the age of its civilization, its role in human history, and the terrible consequences that led us to the current crisis, and the potential the nation has in other ways. Muna said, "Ya habibti ruhti into a portion of the lyrics from a song I've been making about Sudan and framing it as a woman talking to a man. Interesting. She is missing like a loved one, but it's really about a Sudanese woman longing to be back in Sudan and forgetting what the embrace of her country is like. She basically said a metaphor, a beautiful metaphor, mashallah.
That's what a lot of Sudanese songs are.
Yeah,
that's how a
right?
lot of Sudanese songs are written. It's like
Personifying the country.
personifying the
Yeah,
country,
that's
exactly.
true. Anyone here would like to share? Okay. I'm gonna close it off. I just want to say I love seeing everyone like writing. And I just want to make the point that if we all were engaging in this in a way where we wanted this to publicly be out, we literally can get like stands, beautify this little corner here. That in itself would be resistance. Putting everyone's poems, essays, letters, whatever. That in itself is an example. And so easily we could do that as a community here. All right, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a
Yeah. Is it over there? Let me, no, it's on here. Let me show the screen real quick. Okay, y'all, we're getting into our last section here on community organizing. And I'm gonna try to keep it quick because I know we're pretty much at time. But we did start a little bit late, so please bear with us. But if anyone has to leave, like we're not gonna hold you against your will. Please handle whatever you have to handle. But thank you for your patience and for coming.
Thank you for your patience.
No, of course, of course. This has been so informative and just like lovely to talk with all of you and imagine with all of you. So my portion of the presentation is about community organizing and mutual aid. So as Sudanese people, we come from a legacy of resistance, care, and a revolutionary spirit. And so today I want to talk about how we can carry that forward with, with each other through community organizing and mutual aid to support each other and everyone in Sudan as well. So next slide. So I just wanted to open by sharing a short story about the moment that awakened my organizing spirit. So I was visiting Sudan in the summer before my senior year of high school, and I was staying with my aunt in Murabba Sabah fi Bahri Shambat, and it was flooding as it usually does when there's heavy rains. And so the trash trucks weren't coming into the denser neighborhood streets to pick up the garbage. So there was kind of trash everywhere. We were just talking, me and my aunt, about sort of the environmental health effects of this and also just the visual effects of that. And we decided to do something about it. So we wrote these flyers in English and in Arabic, and we went door to door in our neighborhood and just passed them out. And by the end of the week, we had kind of organized a cleanup campaign, and we started collecting trash with all of our neighbors and taking it out to the main roads so that the garbage trucks would pick it up. And by the end of that time, we were actually engaging in conversations beyond just cleaning up our streets in the neighborhood. We were talking about government neglect. Why were we in this situation? We were talking about poverty and inequality. So doing something as simple as passing out flyers in your neighborhood and creating a cleanup campaign really sparked these deeper questions and was my first experience of community organizing. So what is community organizing? Community organizing is when a group of people come together to solve shared problems, build power, and create solutions, especially when systems are failing or harming them. So organizing is how we build power. And today we've been talking about power from multiple different perspectives, shifting power, redistributing power, creating power. And so organizing is really how we build power over the long term, and kind of reclaim our power from the systems that are harming us and oppressing us. As we've touched on, there's power in numbers. So, three people can do something, but 30 people can do more than what 3 people can do, and 300 people can do more than what 30 people can do. So it's really about collective power and taking action as a unit, as a larger unit. So there is an emphasis in community organizing on building power from the ground up, which is what grassroots organizing is. So it's not waiting for institutions or systems or leaders to rescue us or to save us, or even, someone to come from outside of the community to help us. But it's really about, building from the ground up, everyday people coming together around a shared issue or cause and taking the lead, especially as impacted people themselves. It's also a way to create long-term solutions and resilience. So in terms of what a community is, it's really any space that you are a part of or belong to. So if you just take a second to think about communities that you're a part of, it could be a school, a university, a neighborhood, an apartment complex, a digital space, a masjid, a WhatsApp group. It can really be any space where other people are there too, and you're a part of a shared environment or experience. So take a second to just think about what communities you're a part of and realize that you can start where you are. You don't have to be in Sudan to organize for Sudan. So in terms of actually getting started with organizing, it really all is based on relationships. So the first step is really building a base. And what that means is, establishing a strong group of people who are engaged in the issue and committed to actively participating in the organizing efforts. So if we're talking about a petition, for example, like Saad was mentioning, in order to actually have a lot of signatures on that petition, you're going to most likely need to activate your base, which is the group of people who are engaged with you on that issue. And so this is where we talk about long-term or the longevity of a movement. When you have a group of people that you can just tap with a specific action, whether it's come attend this protest or sign this petition, this is kind of setting the groundwork for all of these other forms of advocacy that we're talking about. So in terms of building a base, you want to map out your communities, build a contact list, find a group of 10 friends who care about Sudan and want to do something together, form a group chat or a space where you can, communicate together and create your plans, and coordinate things. And then also kind of what Moedda was talking about earlier, like anchoring the work locally. So, focusing on things that are also happening in the DFW area or what people in America are worried about right now, kind of connecting what's going on in Sudan to those issues that are affecting people where we are in the present moment. So in terms of building those relationships, having one-on-one conversations with people is really helpful, just to figure out what they care about, what skills and capacity they have that they can contribute, hosting listening circles. So, just gathering in a space like this and hearing what people care about, what they want to work towards, what their dreams for Sudan are. Those are all ways that we can create relationships and form ideas and places to start from. And then I also just want to emphasize that relationships are based on trust. So in community organizing, there is a large emphasis on making sure that you are reliable. So if you say that you're going to do something, try your best to do that thing, and try to just cultivate and foster that sense of trust with the people that you're organizing with, because we are trying to create sustainable movements, and we need to be able to rely on each other and trust one another, and feel safe with one another as well. So next I wanted to talk about mutual aid. So mutual aid is a community-driven system of care where people share resources, skills, and support, especially in times of crisis. So you might have heard of mutual aid groups popping up a lot in light of the COVID pandemic, where people were coming together to raise funds and give them to families that needed to pay their rent or buy groceries. And the idea of mutual aid is it's rooted in solidarity. It's rooted in people coming together and taking care of each other, and not charity, which we've touched on a little bit earlier. Charity is a little more of a passive act of like, here's some money, do what you need with it. But mutual aid is more of a community coming together and taking care of each other. It's built on reciprocity, trust, and collective empowerment. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of mutual aid examples of mutual aid in Sudan that are currently happening that we can support. So the emergency response rooms is one example of mutual aid in Sudan. They were started by the resistance committees in 2019. And since April 2023, they've provided aid, medicine, evacuation support, and served over 11 million people in Sudan. They're mainly funded through the diaspora, so people that are not in Sudan that can send money over there. And they're run by volunteers, and they're still going despite being targeted. So the emergency response rooms have also been supported by US aid to a certain extent, but now with the current administration, that is being slashed very heavily. So it's even more important that we organize to raise and send funds to support these efforts that are happening on the ground in Sudan right now. Another example is the community kitchens, which are a part of the emergency response rooms. So the community kitchens are, a longstanding tradition in Sudan. It's really neighbors coming together to cook food and share food. And today they are literally saving lives. So, this is another really important aspect of mutual aid that's happening in Sudan, led by, people on the ground that we really need to be supporting. So, oh yeah.
Activist, the foundation does a lot of this work. So they use a lot of like the funds and money that they get to put on the community kitchens, and they've had some programs where, like they fed families for like a full month and stuff like that. So I think that's a great organization to talk to.
Yeah. Okay. So Moedda said Amal Foundation for the people online, if you couldn't hear. Thank you. We can send that out in the any outreach after this. So what can we do? Oh yeah. Oh, okay. They're on Decolonize Sudan's fundraising list. Okay, amazing. And there's a QR code over here as well. So thank you for lifting that up. So what can we do in the diaspora? How can we start organizing? How can we put this into practice? So one thing that I wanted to highlight was, you know, starting or joining a group like Decolonize Sudan, you know, like Santex Youth, like groups that are already doing this work, whether it's digital or in person. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes if you have a specific idea that doesn't already exist, you can just start that group as well. And so a big part of organizing is actually, you know, conducting outreach, building your base through conducting outreach, but also reaching other people who are not necessarily a part of the organization, but who you need to either raise funds or to participate in more actions. So, sorry, I'm just looking for my notes. Oh, okay. So outreach through canvassing, which is kind of door knocking. I don't know if that's applicable in this exact situation, unless you know the doors that you're knocking on. Just because we're in Texas, I don't want to promote that with regards to Sudan in particular. Yeah, unless you know whose door you're knocking on. But so I guess in this context, flyering is probably a really good you know, strategy. Creating flyers that just outline what's going on in Sudan, what is an action that people can take immediately, whether it's signing a petition, donating to a fundraiser, or contacting their representative. So showing up to your local masjid with flyers, or tabling, setting up a table at your school to talk about what's going on in Sudan. Phone banking, if you have, you know, for example, if we had access to all of the phone numbers of people who come to the Jalia, we could literally sit here one day and just call all of them and be like, hey, can you donate to this? Hey, can you sign this? Hey, can you do this? So it's really just trying to reach as many people as possible to engage in actions that you need to move forward your cause. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was telling stories. So kind of like how I started my presentation with a short story, it's really important that we engage in storytelling, you know, to Shams's PowerPoint, or sorry, to Shams's points that she was making about art. You know, I really believe that storytelling is a really big part of community organizing because stories move people. They help them relate to you. It really humanizes what's going on in Sudan. So when you hear a story of a family and you see their picture, or you see, you know, you just hear the details of what's actually going on, it really connects to your heart in a different way and will move you to do an action more than if someone were just like, Sudan is starving, like we need to do something. That's just so up in the air. It's not tied to any particular person that we can say like we care about, you know. And so you can do this in a variety of ways, as Shams was sharing, and I just wanted to elevate it in my section as well. And then lastly, mobilizing is a part of community organizing as well. So planning protests, direct actions, all of those things. When you have a base, you can have people that will show up to your protests, that will show up to your direct actions. You'll have people that you can tell, hey, we need to boycott this thing. And then this also includes hosting teach-ins, kind of like what we're doing right now, hosting vigils, social media storms, any of those kinds of things. And you always want to give people a clear next step. So if people show up to your protests, you want them to know, we're hosting a workshop next week, please come to that. You guys came here and we're telling you to come on Sunday to the Know Your Rights training. You know what I mean? So you want to always connect it to what's the next thing that we're going to do. And then the next portion is about long-term actions. How can we make our movements and our community organizing more sustainable? So one thing that's really important is building coalitions. So reaching out to organizations that are working on issues that are somewhat similar, and really everything is very interconnected. So when we talk about what's happening in Palestine, that's extremely connected to what's going on in Sudan. So we want to be building coalitions with groups that are organizing around Palestine as well. Black liberation organizations, MSAs, other student organizations that are relevant or adjacent to what's going on in Sudan. And then next, creating materials. So kind of like what Saad did with this toolkit, you know, creating materials that people can actually have to refer to look at when they want to figure out, like, what can I do? What do I want to do next? How can I teach other people? You really want to capture your knowledge and experience and put it in a presentable way, in a tangible way that people can refer to and use to teach other people, or to do their own actions from. So that leads into the next point, training new leaders. What we're doing here today, we're trying to equip y'all with the skills and knowledge that you need to go out and do your own organizing, plan your own actions, you know, and engage in legal advocacy. So that is a huge part of community organizing. It's you know, it might feel like nothing, but it's actually really, really important. And that's how, especially with youth, that's how you kind of create the next generation of change leaders, because we're not always going to be here to do this work. And so it's important to just keep passing it on and make sure that it's sustainable in that way. And then lastly, taking care of each other is really important. This work can be heavy, and it's important to cultivate spaces of healing and joy, and just places where we can pray together, places where we can create art together, places where we can enjoy nature, where we can have conversations that lead us to be able to continue doing this work so that we don't get burnt out or extremely exhausted and hopeless. So in terms of supporting mutual aid in Sudan, again, funding the grassroots movements that are already happening there is really important. So, organizing fundraisers, supporting fundraisers, sharing those fundraisers, organizing Sudan aid kits. The toolkit talks a little bit more about how you can do this. Skill sharing sessions, whether it's over Zoom or in person. If someone knows how to organize a protest, we can get together and learn from that person. Supporting Sudanese creators is also really important. So some of the artists that Shams mentioned earlier, just elevating and uplifting their work and giving them more of a platform, because they are the people who are creating our culture. And it's important to keep that going, especially in times when we're actively being erased. So I just kind of ran through that really quickly, but it's all in the toolkit, so you can refer to that and digest it at your own pace. But I wanted to give us maybe just like 7 minutes right now to do this activity. And then we'll be wrapping up right after this. So for this activity, we're going to be imagining the world, inshallah, when Sudan is safe and the violence is over, and we are able to rebuild our country and rebuild our neighborhoods. We're going to be creating a project or a vision for, for community care or for rebuilding, in Sudan. So in your groups, if you want to just pick a project, whether it's rebuilding a school, rebuilding a hospital, or, I don't know, starting a farm, it can really be anything. Picking 3 ways that you're going to organize to get this rebuilt or this project started. So whether you're going to go door to door, get people together, maybe on social media or WhatsApp, or other tips that we mentioned today. And then 1 mutual aid action that you can start now, whether it's a fundraiser, thinking to the future. If we need to rebuild schools in Sudan, like, how are we going to fund that? We need to start working on that now. Or a skills exchange or putting together kits. So again, pick a dream project of something that you want to rebuild in Sudan, 3 ways that you're going to organize to get that done, and 1 mutual aid project that can help you get started on that vision today. And here are some questions on the screen to help you think through this. Who would you, honestly, you can ignore what's on the screen. Just think about the project, 3 tactics, and 1 mutual aid project. And I'm going to set a timer right now for 7 minutes, and we can get started on that. Just seeing in the chat. Oh, thank you, Mina. I am going to mute myself, but y'all please think through your project once Sudan is safe, that we can start rebuilding, inshallah. All right, y'all. Okay, so if we can go through did each group have a chance to come up with an idea? Yeah, who wants to start? Do y'all want to start?
Yeah. So the cause is rebuilding Sudan's music industry. So we need more of that straight heat, bro. Is a worldwide thing, and music enthusiasts are everywhere. So that's gonna be like easy to get those, like, get the base kind of riled up over or behind the cause. And other than that too, like everybody has like like everybody has an idea of like Sudan's music like leaders. So like it would be like people like, you know, Mahmoud Abdelaziz, Thomas Lehman, like just like a lot of them. But even then, like you can say that alienates the youth if you're going for those older people. But then we have like the Halim and Soja of like today too. So those can be like seen as like, new era community leaders to like help. And you can spread music through like person to person. So like I've personally put on a lot of my friends to like Sudanese rap, for example, sharing on social media too, going to like concerts or haflas with groups, like, and yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, thank you.
There's a lot of people that are busy are like talking about this stuff.
Yeah. And it's like it's a form of resistance, right? Like making sure that our art continues, that our culture continues, our joy continues. So thank you. What about y'all? Or online either? Oh, actually online shared. Oh wait, when was that? When is in the waiting room again? Can you let them? Sorry, I don't know how to do it. Okay, we're letting her in. Okay, do y'all want to share? Okay, funding hospitals.
Yeah. We have like more like studies, also like well, like in Sudan, because whenever like they mention Sudan is free, there was like I was thinking about that with my family as well. Like there is a lack of like, are people like ready to go live right now in Sudan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like,
Like, is it like suitable for people to live there? And we were like thinking about hospitals and schools. They were not ready at all. Like for like if those are the main things that Sudan need right now for it to start having people in country living, and of course like also like houses like damaged houses as well. Yeah.
I also want to add agriculture. I feel like that's a big part because Sudan relies a lot on local farmers. So I know there's this one program or org that donates money to local farmers so they can, provide the community with food. So I think that's
It's Oulad and Nian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Follow Oulad and Nian. They're really great on Instagram.
Thank you for sharing. Let me see what the online folks have to say. Okay, once again, in the scope of the activity, kind of made me feel stuck for an actual answer. This is Riley. Sudan will only be free when the land and the labor are controlled by the people of Sudan. Basically, for imperialism to be defeated, and that surely requires unity with other anti-imperialist groups, both in this country and especially abroad, because that's the main front of empire. So as for a goal, I figure working towards that unity, some sort of united front, is among the most important tasks these days. Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you, Riley.
Could I speak to the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess the idea that me and my sister Muna kind of came up with is like once Sudan is free, inshallah, and like we have the ability to go back and rebuild and like apply our like imaginative initiatives. We came up with the idea to do like a coalition of like community gardens in different neighborhoods, and pretty much having it be something that like the entire community can participate in, and there's like free seeds and stuff, and like when the plants are grown they're like distributed and or distributed and cooked and having like like commute like neighborhood meals and stuff, just a way to kind of like and also like to like regenerate and preserve like our soil and stuff, because that's like one of the, like, we have such invaluable soil in our country, and obviously to combat climate change, and as far as like the strength that exists in Sudan that could be built on is honestly just like our natural essence of community. You kind of touched on the fact that it's kind of just tradition for us to like be outside, and like we lay a mat on the floor and we all just come bring food and eat with each other with our hands, and it's like so we already have such a strong sense of community, so like tapping into that, and yeah, and like tying in agriculture and stuff. That was our idea.
Thank you. I love that idea. Thank you so much. And like you said, food is such a big part of our culture and like our community too. So I love integrating that. And then Riley said, I recently learned about the ways in which Sudanese refugees in Chad have been able to rebuild soil and produce crops on the arid land the government granted them, which is of course a terrible position to be in, but that experience is pretty revolutionary. I think there's reason to be optimistic. Oh, that's beautiful. I did not know that. She said that, or Riley said that there are Sudanese refugees in Chad who were able to rebuild the soil and produce crops on land that they were given that like is ungrowable basically, which was a rough position to be in, but very revolutionary. So reason to be optimistic. Yes. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And Muna, thank you for coming and for sharing. Muna's hopping off. All right. So my last slide is just letting y'all know that revolution is our inheritance. We don't have to be perfect or experts in order to organize and come together to create change for Sudan. We can start small. It can be just a group of you and your friends. If an idea was sparked for you today, act on that idea. And we're also here to support you with anything that you want to create or start. And we're all learning together. So, we can show up for each other and show up for Sudan and build whatever we can, inshallah, and pray that, our people are free. And I will pass it back to Suad with that.
All the facilitators, y'all really did amazing work. I want to thank Santax for bringing y'all's people out and supporting this and engaging with this training, and for the Jalia for hosting us. Alhamdulillah. Just to close out, I just wanted to present resources. So our website is decolonizesudan.org, and that's where we're going to have this presentation, the toolkit, and a bunch of other resources, including a boycott toolkit, and we have previous advocacy presentations, etc. A lot of resources. A whole reading list actually is on the website. And then Decolonize Sudan, at Decolonize Sudan on Instagram is where you can follow for updates. You can, if you are interested in joining Decolonize Sudan, either in chat or immediately come see me after. I can put you in the general membership chat, or if you're interested in joining a particular team to do research or create any type of resources or social media content, please do come join us. And there's also a trainings and teachings team. If you are, so what we do is you can request us all over the nation to do a training or teaching for your community. And we'll evaluate if we have the funds to go over there, or if there's a school involved, if the school could fund it, or if we could just, if it's far away from all of the members, then kind of just evaluate, but we'll come to you and do teachings and trainings, or we'll give you all the resources to do your own teaching or training. So you can reach out to us on decolonizesudan.org or at Decolonize Sudan on Instagram to get those resources if you were looking to do a teaching or training of your own, especially at your school or at your masjid. The really great places to kind of just give basic information, and we give all the slides and everything, so you don't have to start from scratch. All right, thank you so much for coming and for engaging in this training. I hope y'all have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Riley.